Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to our Intro to Financial Astrology workshop today. I'm Cryptodamus, otherwise known as Robert Weinstein. We're going to be starting this in a few minutes. Just give some people a chance to join the session with us. Welcome, welcome, everybody. How's my audio? Can everybody hear me okay? Audio is good. All right. Yes, everybody's going to be sent. I think I'm going to post it on private YouTube, and everybody's just going to be sent the link to the video because the files are going to be pretty large. So yeah, you'll have access to the video that's going to be posted on a private YouTube channel with link only access. All right, good morning, everybody. It's morning here on the U.S. West Coast, and thanks for joining us today. Just got some people are coming in here. How's everybody doing out there? We got a little pump on Bitcoin this morning, up to almost $60,000, but it seems like it's kind of falling back down a little bit today. So we'll see how that goes. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is really the first workshop that I'm doing. As many of you follow me on Patreon know, I'm doing a lot of stuff on Patreon. We do a live stream every month. We do lots of weekly updates, and we got our financial reports and so forth. But this is really the first time I'm doing actually like an educational series. I'm going to try to do something every month. One class or workshop, I think, every month going forward here. And then I might try to do a really comprehensive series at some point on financial astrology. So let's see, we've got 14 so far. And I think we've got about 17 or 18 people all together registered for the class. So that's a great first class. I think everybody's muted, but I'm not hearing any extraneous noise. If people want to put their videos on, that's fine. It's great to see too. And all right, we've got 15 people joined. So yeah, so this is just going to be like an introduction. This is really not a comprehensive, workshop. It's just because the subject is really, really complex. And I'm just trying to, introduce some basic concepts today and get people more familiar. The goal of this one is, to help people understand my content better, either on Twitter, on Patreon, in our email subscription reports, to understand some of the basic concepts of how are we using astrology in the financial context. Now, like I said, we might do like a comprehensive series of 5 or 6 2-hour classes. It really takes something between 10 and 15 hours to do a really comprehensive instructional series on financial astrology. So all right, it's 9:21. It looks like we've got everybody. Most of the people have signed in. So I think we're gonna maybe just give this another minute or two. So this is really the first time I've done this. I know many of you maybe saw me on the astrology podcast with Chris Brennan. That was a pretty comprehensive overview of the financial astrology for Bitcoin. So I did in one of my emails that I sent out to you guys, I did include the link to that podcast. So if you haven't seen that, I would definitely recommend checking that out. Because that's a really good, that really goes really deep into the astrology of Bitcoin. So we're not going to look at technical analysis today. That's a whole other subject, not astrological. We do combine the astrological factors with the technical analysis, as you know, in our updates and reports. We call that the Astro TA system, right? Where we're using the traditional technical analysis for financial markets, and we're combining them with astrological factors. So, excuse me. In the system, we're really just using the astrological factors in a way are kind of just another technical indicator for us, really. And just like any technical indicator, no one signal, no one technical indicator is going to give you, tell you what the market is going to do, right? You're going to get false signals. You're going to get false leads. You're really trying to, what we're trying to do essentially with technical analysis is look for good setups that have a high risk reward ratio when we're trading, and trying to make an educated guess. Our system is a little bit more predictive. You'll see a lot on Twitter. People say, well, technical analysis isn't really trying to predict the markets. It's just trying to look for high risk reward setups. And I think we are trying to actually be a little bit more predictive, sometimes with success and sometimes with not so much. But yeah, we're trying to make hunches and educated guesses based on astrological factors and combining them with the technical analysis. And that's been really successful over the past 3 years. I mean, we've made a lot of amazing predictions and calls and forecasts on the market. And we did tell people over the last 2 or 3 years that 2021 was going to be a huge year for cryptocurrencies. And so far, we've been right on that. Now, we thought Q1 actually was going to be maybe a little bit slower, and we haven't been right about that. Q1 has been, obviously very bullish, and we think that's going to continue into June and July with some big ups and downs. As we see these days for Bitcoin specifically, we're seeing $10,000 to $15,000 moves in the markets, so pretty big swings. Okay, so once again, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today, and I'm gonna activate my screen sharing here. Actually, give me 1 second here. All right, there we go. Let me pull that up. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up some slides for you here. I actually have a PowerPoint presentation, and I will be also sending you guys the PowerPoint presentation. Now let me see if I can get the screen share to work for that. All right, here we go. Okay. Let's see here. So again, just bear with me, guys. This is the first time I've been doing this particular format for the classes here. So let me see. Okay, I have my screen share, but now I've lost my chat. So let me just stop my screen share for a second. I'm not sure how I can get the screen share and the chat box to open at the same time. So let's see here. More. Okay, chat. Let's keep I just want to keep the chat open a little bit here. All right. So can everybody see this PowerPoint slide, the astrology of the planets, module number 1? Okay, great. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. All right, so our goal today basically is to go over the planets and the signs and the aspects, and just look at the fundamental themes for that. That's really the basis of everything. It's really great if people have kind of a basic understanding of astrology, and then start applying it to financial. It's, I think, a little bit harder to just kind of come at it from financial to begin with. I think it's really helpful if you understand the basic underlying archetypal themes of the planets first, planets and signs and aspects, and then start applying it to financial. That's kind of the way that I encourage people to do it, because then you have a really more deeper, profound understanding of the subject matter. So we're going to just start off straight away here and go over the planets. Not going to go over this too much, but why bother with astrology? Yeah, astrology provides a path of greater self-understanding, understanding of others, understanding of the times we live in, and also understanding of the markets. I would add, and the sub branches are psychological astrology, medical astrology, financial astrology. There's relationship astrology, which we call synastry. I just did a synastry reading yesterday for one of my clients. And also relocation astrology, astrocartography. There's also electional astrology, which is picking an auspicious date to launch a business or a wedding or a new project or something like that. There's also horary, which is about more divination, asking of a question, trying to get an answer. All right. Okay. I think we're just going to kind of want to launch into the planets a little bit. Man is a microcosm or a little world because he is an extract from all the stars and planets of the whole firmament, from the earth and the elements. So he is their quintessence. This is from the famous astrologer physician Paracelsus in the 15th century. And people ask, why does astrology work? Well, as above, so below. We are a microcosm. And, astrology is really a universal language of reality. It's a universal language of truth and the fundamental principles of the universe. I don't think astrology, I hate it when people say I don't believe in astrology, because I don't think astrology is a belief system or a religion. I really look at it as a language. It's a language that is very poetic, but it's also mathematical. So it's a very unique, I don't think there really is any other subject similar to astrology. I think it's a very unique, it's an art and a science. It's poetry and it's mathematical. And if you can learn to speak the language of astrology, you can apply that to many different things, as we said, to human relationships, to self-understanding and spiritual growth, to financial markets. So once you have a basic understanding of that language, then it opens many doors for you. We have just looking at a little quickly an example chart here. This is the famous quarterback Tom Brady. Because the goal, of course, in astrology is one of the main goals is to be able to read a birth chart, right? And maybe some of you can and some of you can't, but the goal is to really be able to be fluent enough in this language that all of these lines and all of these symbols really, like, you can look at it and really understand what's going on here, right? So what is a birth chart? It's a complex puzzle of symbols and geometry. It's a blueprint of karma of a person, if we're talking about a person, a map of psychological and physical energy patterns. It's a story about our fate and fortune. And the goal of all astrology education is to be able to read these charts, right? And that's, we look at the, in the financial context, we use what we call the inceptional or the natal chart for Bitcoin. And that's a very important part of our forecast system. And that gives us a lot of information about what's going on in the markets. We also are going to look at Ethereum's chart today. If we have time, we'll look at Link. You can apply this to other different assets. I did a chart for the Airbnb IPO that released a couple of months ago. If you have a first trade date or an IPO date, you can do a chart for a company. You can do an incorporation chart. Sometimes there'll be multiple charts. There'll be an incorporation chart, then there'll be an IPO chart a few years later. So sometimes you'll have to look at a couple of different charts. Then you can also look at the chart for the CEO of that company. You can run a chart for Tesla and then look at Elon Musk's chart. You can use that in a financial sense. I know one of our participants was asking about sports betting. You could look at the charts of the different teams. You could look at the charts of the two quarterbacks and the star players and try to come up with an analysis on a game. Although that's a little bit more the gambling really than financial astrology, but there are some similarities and similar themes. So just, I think we're going to do about an hour and a half, and then we're going to take about a 10 or 15-minute break. I'm going to stop the video actually. And then we're gonna send you a link again. We're gonna email you a new link. So we're gonna do a part 2 video, or I might just leave the video running. Well, let me see how it goes. But maybe it would be easier to do it that way, although it will be a very, very large file. Okay, the planets, yeah, the planets are the foundation of Western astrology. In order to speak the language of astrology, you must master the basic and the subtle meanings and indications of the planetary themes and archetypes. By the way, we have a full astrology course on my website. It's just basic introduction to astrology, and it includes 5 PDFs and 3 tutorial hour to an hour and a half tutorial videos. I think it's $64.95, and it's not financially oriented. It's just a basic introduction to astrology, but it will help you in your financial astrology. And one of the modules, one of the tutorial videos, and one of the PDFs is an introduction to basic chart interpretation. And in fact, that's going to be my next workshop in April. Is we're going to do introduction to natal chart interpretation. And again, that won't be financial specifically, but you can, of course, use it, apply it to financial, studying the charts of Ethereum, Bitcoin, Link, Uni, whatever coin you want to look at. And then also, yeah, you can use it for companies or CEOs and so forth like that. Each planet embodies and represents a fundamental symbolic archetype, a fundamental part of the nature of reality and human psychology. Once you are fluent in the planets, you can proceed to understanding how the signs, houses, and aspects will modify the energy and expression of the planets. Okay, we're having just, if everybody's looking at the chat, we're asking people to mute their mics. It seems like there is some audio interference is coming through here. I'm actually, yeah, I think, let me put my headphones on here. Just excuse me for 1 minute. I'm gonna come right back. All right. So now I can hear the audio a little bit better here through my headphones. Okay. Okay, so in the study of astrology, and when we're looking at the planets and the archetypes, one of the things I really want to emphasize is dignity, the tables of dignity and debilitation. If you're not already familiar with this, this is something that's really important in the study of astrology because it really helps you to understand the relationships between the signs and the planets. And that's going to help you, that's really going to help you a lot in understanding the planets, because really the planets and the signs are very similar archetypes, as we'll see. They're very similar themes. So Venus and Taurus share a lot of themes. Saturn and Capricorn, is really one archetype. Jupiter and Sagittarius is really one archetypal theme. And that also applies to the houses. Now, they're not the same, but they are similar. They come out of the same archetypal theme. So when a planet is in the sign that it rules, it's said to be at home in that sign, and it functions at an optimum level. A planet that's in its exaltation is even better, and that's thought to have special qualities that's said to be like a king on his throne. So the sign of exaltation is the best possible sign for a given planet. So for example, today is a very interesting day. One of the reasons I picked the chart today is because we have, and I tweeted this out yesterday. If any of you are not following me on Twitter, I hope you'll follow me, Astro Crypto Guru. And we noted that today the sun went into Aries. The sun is exalted in Aries. It's conjunct Venus, but Venus is still in Pisces, 1 or 2 degrees behind. And Venus also is exalted in Pisces. And so you have a conjunction of 2 planets that are both in their signs of exaltation. And it just lasts for 1 day until tomorrow, when Venus will go into Aries. And Venus will become debilitated, actually, there. And the nature of that conjunction will change dramatically as Venus is debilitated and combusts to the sun. So planets in the sign of debilitation, such as detriment or fall, are working suboptimally. So detriment is the sign that is the opposite to its rulership. And then the fall is the sign where it's opposite to its exaltation. These are working suboptimally, and they're visiting in a sign where they're uncomfortable. The energy of the planet is not in alignment with the energy of the sign, and so you can get a lot of problems. So this is important when you're assessing a natal chart, and we'll throw some examples out there as well. So this system gives us a basic understanding of planetary strength and weakness. Okay, yeah, we are getting definitely getting some audio interference here. So once again, if everybody out there can just mute themselves, if anyone's not muted, that would be great. Okay. So of course we're going to start off with the sun. The sun is that big giant fireball in the sky. And the glyph, this is the glyph for the sun. So it's really important, if you don't already know them, to understand, to be able to read the glyphs for the different planets, because that's the language of astrology. That's how we read the chart. If you don't know the glyphs, obviously you can't read the chart. So, and you guys we'll send you these PDFs as well, so you can memorize the glyphs. So the sun is, in a natal chart, the basic identity, confidence, and vitality. So in medical astrology, the life force energy of the person. Of course, it's the center of the solar system and the center of our personality construct and our personal identity. It's a hot, fiery, dynamic, masculine, right? So in financial astrology, yeah, this is a core point of identity, and confidence. That is important when you're doing an assessment, of an inceptional chart, for example, the chart, like we said, the chart of Bitcoin. So this is the conscious will, the center of the personality, the core identity structure. It's the essence of who we are. It represents the confidence and resiliency of a person, or self-doubt or low vitality, if not well placed. So if it was in a hard aspect to Saturn, a square or an opposition to Saturn, that would introduce more doubt, problems with self-confidence, obstructions to the vital force. In the case of Bitcoin, for an example, the sun is in Capricorn, and the sun is actually in a conjunction, what we call a stellium, because it's the 3 planets. Well, it's a conjunction to Mars, actually, and Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So this gives us some interesting, this gives us interesting information. Mars Sun conjunction is something that is a warrior energy, right? Because Mars is the god of war. So that tells us something about Bitcoin. Its sun placement is in Capricorn. As when we talk about the signs later today, we'll see Capricorn is a wealth sign. It's actually a sign that is very important in financial astrology, because it represents business and markets, actually. So people who have the sun or many other planets in Capricorn may have a natural inclination towards business, running a business, being an entrepreneur, or they may have a good sense of markets. So that's a favorable for Bitcoin, having the sun there with Mars. Very competitive, very ambitious. As we said, Mars is exalted. We'll get to Mars in a second here. Oh, we skipped a little bit ahead to the moon. We're going to talk about the moon. So the moon, this is the glyph for the moon. And as we know, the moon is more the feminine archetype. It's more receptive. It's more about emotional feelings and emotions. And I would say, in financial astrology, we look at the moon can tell us about the market mood, the emotional situation that's going on in the market. And that can be either, looking at the movement of the moon as it's going through the sky and into different signs and making conjunctions to different planets. So, if the moon is conjunct Saturn, it might be a more feeling of fear in the market just for that few hours. Or intraday, when the moon is conjunct Jupiter, we might see the markets have an exuberant, optimistic feeling. We also, of course, look at the new and the full moons. I'd say actually are very important. And this is all telling us something, about the market situation. So studying the movement of the moon gives us, of course, the moon is the fastest moving planet. So it tells us just a very short-term situation. Although sometimes the full moon and the new moons can give us a little bit of a bigger picture. The moon, when we're looking at a natal chart, the moon is going to tell us something about that person, or in the case of Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's going to tell us something about the nature of that currency, that cryptocurrency, or that asset, or that company. In a natal chart, the moon also is going to rule homes and land and real estate. I'm actually going to type that in here. I have that in for Cancer. Right, because the moon has to do also with our home and family, a very important point in the chart for home and family. So this would also, the moon is going to tell us something, if we have, for example, the moon exalted in Taurus, that might tell us that we have a potential to do well with land and real estate. If the moon has dignity in Cancer here, or Taurus, if the moon is debilitated in Scorpio, I think it's debilitated in Scorpio, and it's debilitated in Capricorn. Also, this may be problems with real estate or homes or land or so forth like this. Also aspects, moon conjunct Jupiter, moon conjunct Venus would be, very beneficial. Maybe the person has that karma or that configuration in the chart that says they will have a good homes and land and real estate. Whereas if they had squares to Mars or Saturn, or oppositions or conjunction to Saturn, they would have more difficulties. So this is an important point for that. But yeah, it tells us about a market mood and emotional sentiment. Bitcoin has the moon in Aries, and it's in a square to Pluto and Mars, right? So we know that Bitcoin is very moody. Actually, we can say it's kind of bitchy sometimes, right? Because of that square, very close square to Mars. So a lot of ups and downs. That's one of the reasons we see, I think, one of the things in the chart that shows a lot of volatility there. Ethereum actually has a debilitated moon in Capricorn, which has a conjunction from Pluto right now. But that's something we'll try to get to later. Obviously, yeah, home, where we find nurturing, comfort, the rate and flow of the vital force, and the general emotional balance of a person. If you see very hard aspects to the moon in a person's chart, then oftentimes they may have emotional difficulties. They might have a difficulty with their mother, or they had a challenging childhood experience, or family or childhood trauma. In the case of outer planets, squares or hard aspects or conjunctions sometimes. Saturn moon conjunction is a very difficult one. Shutdown of a lot of emotional blockages, difficulty to opening the heart. Whereas, of course, this would have to be balanced. There may be other points in the chart that, outweigh that. So, I don't, if anybody out there has moon Saturn, I'm not saying that, you're not a generous person. I'm just saying that aspect itself indicates emotional problems, difficulties, and challenges. But it could have a good aspect. Maybe it has a trine from Jupiter or Venus that would modify that. So you always have to look at the whole chart. But just for the purposes of this class, we're going to be just using more simplified explanations and more simplified examples. Okay, so let's go to the next planet. Here is Mercury. Right, Mercury is the messenger of the gods. Mercury is about information flow. In the natal chart, Mercury tells us about intelligence, how our mind works, how we process information. Now, Mercury in Gemini has a rulership. It's going to be very, usually shows intelligence and curiosity and good ability to process information. Whereas Mercury in Taurus is not necessarily bad, but it's going to be slower, more methodical, have a different approach, more practical. So primary, representation is how we process information, how our mind works, our intellectual and analytical abilities. Mercury rules Gemini, and there's a little bit of disagreement in the systems. Mercury, in the traditional system, Mercury has exaltation, I think, in Virgo. In the modern system of astrology, they say Mercury co-rules both Gemini and Virgo and has exaltation in Aquarius. So Mercury is the only planet where there's actually a disagreement in the different systems and schools of the exaltation of Mercury is somewhat in question. I am a Gemini rising with a Mercury ruler in Aquarius, so I consider Mercury to be exalted in Aquarius. And I think Martin Luther King Jr., one of the greatest orators of all time, Mercury rules public speaking. He had Mercury in Aquarius, exalted in Aquarius, so that's a good example that the exaltation. In financial astrology, the planet Mercury has to do with market. It's just like the moon. The moon also gauges market sentiment, but more on the emotional level. Mercury gauges the short-term market sentiment, because it's also a very fast-moving planet based on news events and information and more rational, analytical analysis. As we've seen many times over and over again, Mercury retrograde can affect the markets, can make technical analysis more difficult, and it makes the markets more vulnerable to sudden news events that change the market sentiment. So one of the things we saw recently with the previous Mercury retrograde, which was in February, we got these tweets from Elon Musk, and then also Tesla also buying $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, and those had a huge effect. Those were sudden news events that had a huge effect on the market. So that was just an example of Mercury retrograde. The Mercury retrograde is complex and confusing. It usually means we're in for a more confusing period. And we've seen various things happen under Mercury retrograde. I think it tends to be a little bit more common for Bitcoin to go down during Mercury retrograde periods. However, during the Mercury retrograde period in February, it went up. We had a huge rally, but it came crashing down actually right within 36 hours of Mercury changing directions. And that happened also in August of 2017, if you go back and look at the price charts and look at the position of Mercury. And also in December, the famous all-time high, or previous all-time high now, of $20,000. That came during a Mercury retrograde period, and then the market shifted dramatically right when Mercury went direct. So we often look for whipsaw changes in the market sentiment right around when either it goes retrograde or direct. We can see dramatic changes in the price structure and price action. And also, just Mercury aspects to the natal Mercury, and the movement of Mercury also tells us things about, what's going on in the markets. I mean, Mercury actually the other day, last week, went into Pisces, which is something I tweeted about a lot this week. I found it was very difficult because Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, right? Because Mercury is either ruled or exalted in Virgo, the opposite sign. It does very well in Virgo, which is a very precise, analytical sign. And in the sign of Pisces, it doesn't do well, because Pisces is a big picture visionary sign that's kind of trying to transcend the material world and is not interested in details or rational analysis. It's also a non-rational sign, Pisces. It's an intuitive sign. It can be very intuitive, but Mercury is more of a logical, rational, analytical planet. So you can see why it's debilitated in Pisces. It's kind of blown out. I mean, immediately I experienced it. I had, several clients just not show up, or had a client in the UK, and of course there was the time change here in the US that didn't get accounted for, and so he missed his consultation. And then I had two other clients just didn't show up at all. So that's classic, right? Because Pisces is kind of spaced out. It may be a poetic or a great romantic, a great poet. It may be a highly psychic, intuitive, but it's not reliable in terms of showing up on time. And that's a problem when Mercury, that's a problem that gets highlighted when Mercury goes into Pisces. So Mercury is the way we think and communicate, and also rules travel, of course, and communication. And as we know, when Mercury goes retrograde, we have more problems with travel, communication breakdowns in interpersonal relationships. Your phone dies, your computer crashes, your email gets hacked. All of these things seem to become more common during the Mercury retrograde period, right? It's a bizarre phenomenon, but it's real. I mean, I think anybody who has studied this will attest to the fact that it does happen more frequently and in stranger ways than when Mercury is direct. Now, Mercury retrograde isn't bad. It can be good for going, finishing up unfinished business, editing a manuscript, or cleaning out your closets. Okay, so Mercury, yes, rules Gemini and Virgo, exalted in Aquarius. So it's in its fall, actually, in Leo, and it's, fall in Leo and Pisces here. Just going to add this in to our Pisces in detriment. Detriment is in Sagittarius. So let's go on to the next planet, which is Venus. Excuse me, let me have a little bit of tea here. So Venus, as we know, is a very important planet for financial astrology. Venus is the goddess of love and money. Venus is the goddess of all the good things in life. So Venus is really one of our most important planets in financial astrology. And of course, this is the famous painting of the Venus, the goddess. So Venus is the love goddess, right? So Venus rules Taurus and Libra. So Taurus is more of the earthy, practical wealth gathering aspect of the planet Venus, whereas Libra is more of the relationship, marriage, love, interpersonal relationship aspect of Venus, social charm and grace. Also, both signs can indicate artistic talent as well. And Venus is exalted in Pisces, where it is right now. And that's an aspect of really divine love and higher spiritual consciousness. So Venus is debilitated in the signs of Mars, right? The goddess of love doesn't like to be in the signs of the god of war. Interesting how that worked out. And those signs just happen to be also opposite of Venus's rulership signs, right? So Venus is debilitated in Aries, opposite the sign of its rulership in Libra, right? It's amazing how the system is laid out. I mean, how much it makes sense. And then Venus is, has dignity by rulership of Taurus, the wealth sign Taurus. And it's opposing, and when it's debilitated in Scorpio, the sign opposing Taurus, the other Mars sign, right? So Venus doesn't like to be in Mars sign, and it's also actually in its fall in Virgo, the sign opposite its exaltation in Pisces, right? These are takes time to memorize all these, but very important because it gives you a better understanding of the planet and it gives you a better understanding of the sign. Virgo is a very modest, conservative, cautious sign. Not really Venus's cup of tea. Venus is an earthy sensuality, sexuality, sensuality, and likes the good things in life. And Virgo's, more about kind of hard work and working behind the scenes and very cautious, conservative sign and kind of more conservative sign, shy and very modest. So Venus not really get to be itself there, not very comfortable. In financial astrology, Venus is how we deal with material resources and money. It's one of the points in our chart that we look at. It represents wealth and money and the good things in life, where we find comfort in life. Venus can bring wealth and money when well placed. So it's an important planet for assets, natal charts analysis, and it's a very important planet for transits for trading setups, both in our own charts, in the asset we're looking at. So for example, Bitcoin has Venus in Pisces in the natal chart, exalted, which is very good. That's a wealth aspect, and that's a wealth placement. Venus is sextiling to Pluto in the Bitcoin natal chart. And we'll look at the Bitcoin natal chart later, but just as an example, that is a wealth aspect. That tells us something about Bitcoin immediately, just when we look at the natal chart, that there's a lot of potential for wealth here. So yeah, again, now we've got that example here. Whereas, interestingly, Ethereum Venus is debilitated in Virgo. The Ethereum Venus is actually in a very complex position. It's conjunct the other wealth planet, Jupiter, which is very favorable typically, but it's an out of sign conjunction because Jupiter's at the end of Leo and Venus is at the very beginning of Virgo. So that weakens it slightly. And then at the same time, they're both square Saturn, indicating a lot of limitations and problems. So you get a very paradoxical placement there that's very complicated. I think the Bitcoin Venus particularly is a little bit more straightforward with exaltation and a very nice sextile to Pluto there, which is a wealth aspect. Okay, moving right along. We've got a lot of ground to cover here, so I gotta pick up the pace a little bit. Mars is the god of war, right? Competition, conflict, and war. So how does that work in financial astrology? Well, Mars is about getting our needs met and attaining our goals, okay? It's a very instinctual, the reptilian brain. It also represents courage and confidence. How we assert ourselves, how we get our needs met. It's obviously a very sexual planet. Mars represents our sexual desire and competition. You'll see a lot of great sports stars have a very strong Mars. I wrote an article for the Mountain Astrologer and I did an assessment. Tom Brady and LeBron James, two of the greatest athletes of the 21st century. They both have a very strong Mars with trines and sextiles to Pluto and the sun. So in financial astrology, Mars is very tricky. It can cut both ways. Mars can bring market confidence in the soft aspects of the trine and the sextile, which are the harmonious aspects. We call them the soft aspects. But it indicates difficulties with loss in the hard aspects. It's almost like an attack, on the market. Bad placements, such as in the 12th house, is not what we want to see. And for example, once again, the Bitcoin Mars is also exalted in Capricorn, the sign of business and markets. Mars is very competitive. It's exalted in its best possible sign in Capricorn, showing that this is extremely confident and very competitive and wants to take over, very ambitious, and has a great sense of financial markets and business. So this is a great placement for any type of natal chart. And it also represents, of course, how we deal with the difficult emotions of anger, frustration, and resentment. But Mars is the lesser malefic. So when Mars is in a square configurations, a lot of times we'll see problems in the market. We'll see choppy price action. We'll see declines and a sell-off when Mars makes some negative aspects. When Mars makes favorable aspects, in the case of Bitcoin or Ethereum chart, we'll often see more confidence in the market. Okay, Jupiter is our next planet. Jupiter is the greater benefic, right? So in some ways similar to Venus, it's the good things in life, but it's a planet of luck and good fortune. It's a planet of blessings, divine blessings. It's the largest and brightest of the planets. And you can see in my slide example here, the size of Jupiter relative to the size of the Earth. So this was important, right, for because it's a planet that represents prosperity and abundance and expansion, because it was the biggest and brightest planet in the night sky. And that was very important to the ancients, right? Because the light, the brighter the light, the more benefic, the more benefic the planet. And in the case of Mars, of course, the planet is red, and the red, was synonymous actually with blood being spilled in battle for the ancients. And so Mars took on that more malefic quality, while Jupiter was the biggest and brightest star, was a planet of good luck and good fortune, expansion and prosperity. This is the glyph for Jupiter, also known as Zeus in the Greek system. So this is the greater benefic, abundance, prosperity, confidence, good fortune. It also represents overseas journeys, long distance travel, foreign travel to other cultures and other countries. So, Jupiter represents confidence, optimism, enthusiasm, but it's a very optimistic planet. So when you get nice combinations of Mars or Jupiter and the Sun, or Mars and the Sun, those all show confidence. But the squares sometimes can be challenging. They can show overconfidence or a tendency to have a bad risk management sometimes. Jupiter is a good planet, but it can also be excessive or self-indulgent. So it can bring some problems. It does indicate wealth, money, and good fortune. Also, like I said, abundance issues like waste, overconfidence, or overindulgence. Financially, it is our main wealth planet in astrology. Aspects to the natal and from transiting Jupiter are some of the most important aspects for profitable trading setups. For example, we've had a couple of Jupiter transits. We had the Bitcoin had its 12-year Jupiter return in December, and it made an all-time high at that time, what was a new all-time high during the Jupiter return. Bitcoin's Jupiter is actually debilitated in Capricorn, which is interesting. It hasn't seemed to hamper it too much because it has, many other favorable configurations there. But again, in Capricorn, right, which is a sign of markets and business, but Capricorn is very kind of strict. It's very practical, and Jupiter is not exactly a practical planet. It's a more big picture visionary planet. So it doesn't do well in Saturn's sign, typically. Now we saw this also, in talking about financial astrology in the bigger picture, the broader sense, right? We saw this, I would say really during this pandemic of 2020. Where we had a market crash, at least we did in March. And, obviously just a terrible economic crisis all over the world, of many people out of work, of businesses going out of business, and a lot of, very high unemployment, in the United States and other places, right? Because number one, Jupiter was in Capricorn for all of 2020. Jupiter, interestingly, in December, right around Christmas, was eclipsed. It was on the negative south node, which we'll get to shortly. It was eclipsed. There was a solar eclipse conjunct Jupiter on Christmas Day of 2019. In Capricorn, the sign of its detriment, the sign of its fall, right? Which is the worst, possible placement actually for Jupiter. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces. Jupiter is actually exalted in Cancer, which is very interesting. It also does quite well in Taurus. Jupiter in Taurus is a very good wealth placement. So in fall in Capricorn, and then it was afflicted by Saturn in Capricorn. So Saturn and Jupiter were conjunct in Capricorn. And they were widely conjunct. Of course, the actual conjunction took place at 0 degrees Aquarius on December, I think it was December 19th. But, international travel came to a halt. Jupiter has a general sort of a protective, good fortune and prosperity power. that was hindered for all of 2020 while Jupiter was in the sign of Capricorn. So here's where the debility and dignity is very important, right? Understanding it was close to Saturn for much of that year. It was also in a conjunction to Pluto, which was very complex. We're not going to get into that. But well, that actually made these kind of extremes of, you know, high tech stocks soaring while so many people out of work and couldn't even pay their rent. That was a Jupiter Pluto effect to some degree. But Jupiter was debilitated in Capricorn. Jupiter was also afflicted by there being a wide conjunction to Saturn. And we see as soon as, you know, Jupiter went into Aquarius, we saw a shift. The pandemic, you know, peaked, and the vaccine immediately was rolled out literally within days of Jupiter leaving, you know, the sign of Capricorn. Now, put aside, I know there's so many political and conspiracy and whatever different theories about the pandemic and the vaccines. So put that all aside, you know, for now, we all have our different opinions about that. But the fact is, as soon as, you know, the vaccine came out, as soon as Jupiter went into Aquarius. And now, you know, we're seeing actually the signs of an economic recovery as Jupiter businesses are opening up again, at least in the United States. And the vaccine seems to be effective. It seems to be reducing the numbers, and things are opening up again. So, and Jupiter's pulling away from Saturn now. Now, Jupiter's going to go into Pisces in May of this year, which is really just in about 8 weeks from now. Now, this is very important. I'm telling a lot of people this. I've talked about this in my live streams. This is very good for Bitcoin. We'll talk about that later because it's going to conjunct the Bitcoin natal Venus, which is at 0 degrees Pisces. But Jupiter is going to regain its dignity in Pisces, at least for a couple of months. It's only going to go for a couple of months, and then it's going to retrograde back into Aquarius. So we may have to revisit some problems. That Jupiter should regain its protective good fortune and abundance powers again when it goes back into Jupiter. International travel should become easier because Jupiter will be in a more beneficial position. We've seen, you know, international travel has just been completely restricted because of the pandemic while Jupiter, you know, has been afflicted. And so when Jupiter regains its dignity in Pisces, then we can have, you know, I think more economic prosperity, and we can see more international travel restrictions to be eased. It's a very hopeful, optimistic placement of Jupiter going into Pisces. Now, that could also bring some problems with inflation or these bond rates going up, and there could be some problems with the overexpansion. Maybe in 2022, when Jupiter's going to go into Pisces for good, I think right around January 1st or so. Maybe it's December 30th. I can't remember, but it goes into Pisces, you know, for good, and it's going to go all the way through Pisces. So in 2021, Jupiter's only going to go to about 2 degrees Pisces before it retrogrades back into Aquarius in July or August. But anyway, we're just trying to give you a feel for how this stuff works, right? I was able to predict that there was going to be a huge economic crisis, you know, in 2020 based on the alignment of Saturn and Pluto conjunction. And we'll get to that here with Saturn. So Saturn, you know, Saturn is a more difficult planet than Jupiter. Saturn is a planet of problems and difficulties and challenges. But Saturn, as I often tell people, it can be either your best friend or your worst enemy, because Saturn can also bring success and achievement through hard work and discipline and focus. In fact, I would go so far as to say there is no real accomplishment without some Saturn helping you. But Saturn can also bring great challenges, pain, and suffering, especially when we're younger, because Saturn is a planet of maturity, and Saturn ages well. So Saturn problems, if you have terrible Saturn aspects in your natal chart, they get better as you get older. They're a lot worse when you're younger, especially in grade school and high school. Bad Saturn aspects, we can really suffer. But as we get into our second Saturn return in our 50s and 60s, the Saturn problems can really, really become much, much less problematic. Just want to just check in with everybody real quick here. Is this stuff making sense, guys? Is everybody following along? Does anybody have, I'll take one or two questions really briefly here. My Saturn return was no joke. Yes, it's all making sense. Yeah, Saturn return when you're 28, 29, and also again when you're 57, 58 can be very challenging times where we can also be a time of accomplishment though. Okay, so far everybody seems to be following. Yes, this is good. How does the retrograde Saturn show itself? That's a good question. I mean, that's all of the planets have their retrograde phase. I mean, I don't pay attention to it that much, really. I mean, Saturn retrograde can be a little more challenging sometimes. I mean, the main thing is like for electional astrology, you don't want to launch a new business under a Saturn retrograde because Saturn does have a strong signification for like for a business, for running a business. Yeah, I wouldn't launch a new business under a Saturn retrograde period. Also in medical astrology, for Saturn rules like the joints and in particular the knees. So I had a client, who was looking to schedule a knee replacement, and we had to wait until Saturn was direct. You wouldn't schedule like a joint, like a hip or a knee replacement surgery while Saturn was retrograde. Something like that. I mean, Saturn, the retrogrades, the retrograde transit, it's hard to say really. I mean, it's more internalized, there's a different quality to it. I mean, sometimes it ends up worse, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, it depends on a lot of other factors too. I mean, all the planets are retrograde for long periods of time. I don't pay attention. It's not that big a factor really. I mean, it's something to look at, Mercury, Jupiter and Saturn are retrograde for long periods of time. So it's not that, what's more uncommon is Mars retrograde periods tend to be kind of more difficult and malefic. A Venus retrograde period is actually quite challenging for the markets and can be challenging and complex. And it can indicate turning points actually both to the up or the downside, Venus retrogrades. We have a significant Venus retrograde coming in December, also together with eclipses and with the third and final Uranus-Saturn square in December. So that would be that's something we're going to be talking about and looking at, because Venus is going to station retrograde conjunct Pluto for like a couple weeks. So we think there could be a real market swoon there. There could be a temporary sell-off or a real change in market sentiment or direction. But I don't necessarily think or know if it's going to be a long-term crash or not. I don't think it will be for Bitcoin because we have other signals that indicate Bitcoin bull market continues into April, at least into April 2022. That's what we're thinking. That's our current, forecast. Again, for electional astrology, I might not launch Jupiterian projects under, especially having to do with travel or higher education under a Jupiter retrograde. Okay, good. So it sounds like everybody's following and this stuff is making sense and so forth. So let's talk about the planet. Yeah, the planet Saturn, of course, has the famous rings. Saturn is the greater malefic because it's the principle of limitations and hardship, challenges and adversity, but also can bring success and great achievement through hard work. It's the father archetype. Difficulties, challenges, obstructions can indicate rigidity, fear, scarcity, lack. It rules boundaries and structures. It can bring healthy boundaries in the soft aspect. It can indicate overly rigid boundaries in the hard aspects. Hard work, discipline, focus, loyalty, healthy boundaries, stability, and ultimately success and great accomplishment. Don't get caught in the trap of Jupiter bad, Saturn good. That's a very oversimplified, way of looking at astrology. It doesn't work that way. And Jupiter can cause a lot of problems. And Saturn can be your best friend. It really just depends on the different alignments. But, Saturn has to be respected because it does indicate the principle of karma. And as I've said a couple of times on Twitter and elsewhere, it represents, people get mad at Saturn. Someone last night on Twitter, called Saturn an asshole. And I tweeted back to her, I said, hey, be careful. Saturn represents your own karma. It's only an instrument of your own karma. So Saturn's only bringing back to you what you've put out there, what we've put out there. And we all have bad karma. It can also indicate good karma, again, too, for success. But, but Saturn, when Saturn is riding you hard, it's tough. I mean, it's going to bring problems and difficulties to overcome. But it can also make you into something, really great. I think I put the financial here. Discipline, organization, hard work. Saturn is a bearish planet kind of in general. It often indicates that it can be a point that we can often indicate a sell-off or a pullback in the markets. And, for example, Saturn's 3 conjunctions to the Bitcoin natal Mars correlated to the year-long bear market of 2018. Saturn was the main factor of 2018, and sure enough, it really limited the ability of the market to expand. I don't know about you guys, but we all thought, cryptocurrencies, this is the future, and we're gonna, this is gonna be the technical revolution, technological revolution in financial markets, and we were right. We were right, but wrong year. 2018 was not the year for us. And that was, that correlated very, very closely to Saturn. Let me see if I do have a chart here that I want to share with you. Let me see if I can get this. Can everybody see this new chart here, this price chart? Sorry, I never know if this with Zoom here when we do the share. Okay, no. Okay, you can't see the price chart. So hang on a second. I'm going to stop the share for a minute. All right, and let me go back and see if I can get that. Here we go. How about now? Can people see this price chart now? Yes, okay. Wait a second, let me see here. Sorry. Yes, okay, good. Okay, so here we go. This is 2017, 2018 astrological price correlations on the Bitcoin price chart. So we can see the new all-time high was here. And I went over this in detail on Chris Brennan's podcast, so you can go back and look at that. In December of 2018, Jupiter and Mars were both sextile the Bitcoin natal Mars and Sun. Confidence, expansion, abundance, right? And then Saturn actually entered Capricorn. Let me see if I have a chart that has a more. Okay, yeah. So let me. Sorry, guys, just bear with me for 1 second here. Okay, I'm going to show you something else here. All right, let's look at this chart. Let's look at this, guys. This is a tale of Jupiter and Saturn in financial astrology. Jupiter was sextile the Sun December 10th through the 16th. And you can see that that's roughly marked off here on the chart with these 2 blue lines. Let's see here. Okay, hope everybody can see this new price chart, right? So you can see that Bitcoin literally made an all-time high as Jupiter sextiled its Sun. The sextile is the 60-degree angle. It's a very favorable between Jupiter and the Sun. That's a very favorable aspect. And Mars was also involved in that as well. And you can see the all-time high actually came right basically in that date range window. Now, just 4 days later, something happened here where, number one, Mercury changed from retrograde to direct. And at the same time, Saturn entered Capricorn, where Bitcoin has 4 planets. And immediately, Saturn made a conjunction to the Bitcoin Pluto 8 days later, and you see the price dropping already by 25%, a $5,000 drop. Now, Bitcoin then went on to make a conjunction to the Bitcoin natal Mars, number 1, February 1st through the 10th. And you got a low that I think went down to about $7,000 on the wick. This is the daily chart, which went down to about $7,000 to $8,000 here. So this is an example of the effect of Jupiter on the price action, followed very quickly by the effect of Saturn, making that conjunction to the Bitcoin Mars. And Mars is a planet of confidence. Mars is a planet of getting our needs met, getting our goals achieved. Mars is a planet of vitality and going out there and getting our needs met and putting ourselves out there. And Saturn is a planet of limitations and fear and obstacles, right? So you can see the symbolism here. This is the poetic, the poetic nature of astrology. It tells a story. So astrology would have predicted that the Saturn conjunction to the Bitcoin Mars would have crashed the price. And in fact, I did. This is one of my first major predictions on Twitter. I said we were going to have a major collapse in the price in February of 2018. Unfortunately, I wasn't trading that much, so I didn't know how to short Bitcoin. I don't know if there were that many. I think there were opportunities to do it, but so I didn't make money off of that call per se. But I was able to make that prediction. So I hope that's just a helpful illustration of that. So let's okay. So let's go back to our slideshow here. Whoops, no, we got way ahead. So Pluto. Okay. So yeah, for example, 3 conjunction of Bitcoin to the natal Mars. However, in the case that we just had recently, where Saturn was conjunct the Bitcoin North Node, we saw actually success and a new all-time high. At least on the true node, there's some debate about whether to use the mean node or the true node, and they're about 1 degree apart. So that's a whole other complex discussion. But I was using the true node, and we did see actually an all-time high with Saturn on the Bitcoin North Node. The North Node is a point of success, and so we'll talk about that later. And acceptance by traditional institutions. The conjunction and hard aspects of Saturn are unfavorable, whereas the trine and the sextile can be very good. Of course, Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. To put that in here. A few little details got away from us. It's exalted in Libra, and it's in its detriment in Cancer and fall in Aries. So Saturn is in Aquarius now with rulership over in Aquarius. So Saturn has dignity. Saturn still has dignity. Okay, so now we're going to go to the outer planets. The outer planets are a little bit different. They're modern planets that were found, with the help of modern technology. Right? We could not see. Saturn is the last planet you can see with the naked eye. So they're fundamentally different than the traditional planets. They represent modern times, modern circumstances, psychological concepts, modern psychological concepts such as, modern technology, the industrial age, and the unconscious mind, because they required modern technology in order to become aware of them. So they represent like a heightened state of consciousness and awareness, and they represent hidden, unseen forces like the unconscious mind. They were discovered around the same time that Freud and Jung, began talking about the idea of the unconscious mind. They represent powerful forces on a greater order of magnitude and overall complexity of the modern world. So they represent more powerful forces than the original traditional planets. So let's look at Uranus here. The planet Uranus is the planet of freedom. It's the modern ruler of Aquarius. It's total freedom, free from all limitations and boundaries and structures. It's a very important point that can indicate genius and brilliance, sudden flashes of insight. It's also the planet of the sudden, unexpected surprise. It represents the unpredictable itself. So, a lot of when we talk about financial astrology and people, oh, did you see that, coming? Were you able to predict that in advance? you know, we've got limitations to what we can do with financial astrology, because when Uranus, you know, for example, when Uranus is a very strong planet, a featured planet, it's going to bring a lot of unpredictable events, and Uranus is always going to bring what you least expect. So we have, you know, there is a whole symbolic theme in financial astrology that represents just things you can't predict, the unpredictable. And so that's going to give us limitations. For example, in February, Neptune was conjunct the Bitcoin natal Uranus. Now in September, I said that was going to be an unfavorable aspect that would bring a sell-off. Lo and behold, we got a 25% sell-off. Great buying opportunity. One of the last great buying opportunities. I think it went down to $9,000, or went down from 12.5 to about 9,000. You know, and then so in February, Neptune came back to make a conjunction with Bitcoin's natal Uranus again. At the same time, Uranus and Saturn were square in just as a general aspect. So Uranus was a very big theme in February. And this time, Bitcoin went up during Neptune conjunct Uranus. I forecasted again. I said this would be an unfavorable period. It was not unfavorable, you know. Now, luckily, we use a technical, and this is an indication where this is an example where we used a technical analysis. And I laid out some very clear technical criteria. I said if Bitcoin breaks above the 20-day moving average and the daily MACD turns green, then we'll change our analysis and we'll become bullish. So this was an example where, you know, Uranus decided to do the exact opposite in February that it did in September. And so that's going to always create an element of, you know, the unexpected and the unpredictable surprise in our forecast. We have to have latitude for understanding that. Now, Uranus is a major player right now. It's one of the most important bullish planets for Bitcoin right now. It's in a trine to the Bitcoin, Mars, and Sun all year. Uranus is in the sign of Taurus right now. Uranus is a planet of revolution, of the revolution, high technology. Uranus represents technology. So Uranus is a sudden, dramatic, unexpected market events. It indicates excitement, but also instability in the market structure. Higher volatility and more wild price swings, especially in the hard aspects. For example, Bitcoin natal Uranus is opposing the Bitcoin natal Saturn. So that's an aspect in the inceptional chart. And it indicates a constant breakdown of stability and structure. It tells us that Bitcoin is inherently unstable and has a higher level of volatility. On the other hand, the transiting Uranus trine the natal Pluto and natal Mars brought a very exciting rally in April through June 2019. And I want to just take a quick look at that for a second here. Now, let me see if I can find that chart. That was a very interesting chart. So I've got to go back to my screen share here, and we're going to look at this one. So here's another, you know, example in financial astrology using the Bitcoin price chart, where you had Saturn was conjunct the Bitcoin Mars, and then Saturn was conjunct the Bitcoin Sun over here, right, where my cursor is in red. You've got right here, you can see this was $3,000. This was, you know, the end of the bear market, but at the time we didn't know that. People were saying, yeah, Bitcoin is dead. That was a fad. It's over, right? Saturn was conjunct the Bitcoin Sun. There was a loss of confidence. There was a contraction in the market, right? Then right over here, Uranus entered or re-entered Taurus. Whoops, sorry, I'm getting a little bit too, whoops. Yeah, right over here, Uranus re-entered Taurus. And then here, Uranus made a trine to the Bitcoin natal Pluto. And all of a sudden, you got, you know, after months of these little tiny candles dragging along at $3,000 to $4,000, Uranus trines the Bitcoin natal Pluto, and all of a sudden you get a huge candle right? You get a huge candle here. Let me see where that price. So the price was hovering around $4,000, and all of a sudden it popped up $2,000. That was a 40% increase, on that aspect, and that was the beginning of a new bull market. And then Uranus continued to approach a trine to the Bitcoin Mars, right? So 2018, the story was Saturn conjunct the Bitcoin Mars, fear, contraction, limitation, obstructions. And then all of a sudden, Uranus started to trine the Bitcoin Mars, and boom, this thing just starts going up to $13,000. Uranus makes the exact trine right in the last 10 days of June. Boom, exact price peak in the price correlates in a 10-day range that I called 8 weeks in advance. I said there would be a market huge rally with a top in the late June of 2019. And we got that. So that was a really great example. That was one of our best calls of all time. And that was back when the market was a little easier to call, actually, in some ways. So that's an example. We got a sudden excitement, new technological revolution of Uranus and Taurus. Taurus is the status quo sign. Uranus is a disruption. Taurus is also the sign of money and wealth, right? And Uranus is like new technology, futuristic, sudden dynamic changes in the status quo. So a financial revolution, a technological revolution affecting global finance. And we predicted that. Years in advance, actually. Now, there was a little fake out in 2018 because Uranus went into Taurus for a few months, and we thought that there was going to be some changes, and that actually was that actually did not play out that well. All right. Uranus represents the lightning strike, sudden dynamic changes in the market. This is the glyph for Uranus. Now, Neptune, we're going to talk about Neptune. We've got a lot of Neptune activity. Neptune, of course, is the god of the ocean. And that has an important theme that we need to know about. Neptune is a planet. Neptune is not a money planet. Neptune is a planet, a spiritual planet. It's actually more about the transcendence of the material world. It doesn't really care about, it's not practical, it's not material, and it doesn't care about money. It's really about non-ordinary states of consciousness, higher states of consciousness, but also lower states of consciousness. And that can be drug abuse, addiction, alcoholism. Neptune is about either transcendence of the self to touch higher states of spiritual consciousness, or it can be self-destruction through escapism, alcoholism, and addiction. It can also be plant medicines, spiritual, plant medicines for healing. I just posted on Twitter the other day about, Oregon is legalizing psychedelic mushrooms for the use in psychotherapy for the treatment of trauma. So that would fall under Neptune, for example, and Pisces, spiritual meditation techniques and practices. It can also bring confusion, illusion, delusion, and deception, and the inability to deal with the material world, the naivete, romanticism, and impractical, and also like our idealistic and romanticized ideals crashing down to reality. Sometimes Neptune will do that. So how do we think about this financial markets? In some cases, it's favorable. For example, Neptune can be a positive factor of hope, faith, and confidence and optimism in markets. So think about spiritual. How do we translate that spiritual side into financial markets? Like faith. For example, Neptune was actually sextile the Bitcoin sun for almost the entire year of that long rally of 2017. So Neptune was actually a very important factor there. However, these Neptune hard aspects can highlight weaknesses and bring confusing circumstances to the markets. Neptune conjunct the Bitcoin Uranus gave us mixed and confusing results. with a major correction in September 2020, but a soaring rally in 2021. In February of 2021, this is a classic example where Neptune was very confusing. So where, you know, Uranus represents the surprise, the sudden dramatic surprise and the unpredictable. I mean, Neptune is also very hard to predict because it's confusion and delusion. So you can see when Neptune conjunct Uranus, those two planets, that's not going to be an easy aspect to predict. Now, just in the next 4 weeks, we have two Neptune aspects that are very important for Bitcoin. People who are maybe purchasing this video a couple of years from now can look back on the price charts and see how that played out. But for now, Jupiter is going to conjunct Bitcoin's natal Neptune in the next week or so. And that we think is maybe an optimistic bullish aspect. But at the same time, Neptune is going to be, transiting Neptune is going to be opposing the Bitcoin natal Saturn, which is a much more problematic aspect. So we can see that the next 4 weeks are very confusing and mixed, and it's going to be hard to have a clear forecast there. We think things become much better in late April and especially in May. But Neptune's opposition, to the Bitcoin natal Saturn, because Saturn represents stability, right? And the structure, like market structure. So the price structure, or also it could have to do with the mining network or the exchanges. Somewhere in the structures of Bitcoin, Uranus may show us where there's a weakness. So that's something I'm looking for over the next, Neptune also represents deception. So it's possible that some type of deception could come to light, some type of fraudulent scheme or deception involving, I mean, God knows, Tether, Bitfinex. I think that resolved last month, but you never know, or something else. So we'll see how that plays out. So we've got, as we said, we've got a transit. This is interesting, right? Because we have a transit to the Bitcoin natal Neptune, but then we also have a transit from Neptune to the Bitcoin natal Saturn. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how that plays out. Pluto is a planet that represents power and the evolutionary process of breakdown, death, rebirth, regeneration, and evolution. To a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of awareness. Whoops, no, we skipped ahead there. Where's my Pluto? Pluto, the destroyer, the modern ruler of Scorpio. Yes, Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces, the other sign of the ocean. Pretty good symbolism there. Pluto, that's the glyph. There's also, sometimes you'll just see it as a giant P. Oops, here we go back here. So Pluto in financial can indicate power, and strength in some cases, but it can also indicate dramatic breakdowns in the market structure. Example, Pluto on the Bitcoin natal sun, which was back in April of 2014, correlated to the infamous Mt. Gox hacking attack, almost to the week of the exact conjunction of Pluto. Now, there were other factors involved there too. I think Uranus was also square the Bitcoin sun at that time too. So you had actually a very complex outer planet alignment. But this nearly destroyed Bitcoin, as we know. Over $500 million of Bitcoin was hacked at that time, which would probably be over $500 billion in today's Bitcoin. And people just said, oh, Bitcoin is dead, and that was the end of Bitcoin. Right. But what actually happened is a new generation of exchanges with much better safety protocols arose from the ashes, and modern Bitcoin trading was actually born out of that destruction. So this is a classic Plutonian tale of destruction and death, followed by that rebirth, that regeneration and evolution to a higher state. So, that was a really interesting example. Now, we just had another example recently where Bitcoin Pluto was transit Pluto, right, in late Capricorn, 25 degrees, 26 degrees, 25 degrees, conjunct the Bitcoin progress sun. Now, this is a slightly more advanced technique using progressions. I don't know how advanced you guys are, but that went exact on February 19th or 20th, I think, and Bitcoin collapsed. You know, we had a $15,000 move down within that 48-hour period. I was watching it, you know, I kind of wrote that aspect off because we weren't seeing any effect. And it literally hit within, you know, to the day, almost exact. And I can actually show you that, you know, I'm going to show you that, and then we're going to take a quick break here. So just give me a second. I'm going to go to this astrology software here. Then we're going to have a little coffee break in a minute. Let's see if we can get back to my screen here. Okay. So can you guys see this this astrology software? Yes. Okay, perfect. So this is Luna software, by the way, that we recommend. Solar Fire, of course, is the big software for professional astrologers. Doesn't run well on Macs though. So I'm using this cloud software, Luna software. So here is the Bitcoin natal chart that we're using for January 3rd, 2009, 6:15 p.m. London. We don't know the exact location, so we don't really know if this ascendant, if the ascendant is correct here. I'm going to put this on secondary progressions, which is an advanced forecasting technique. You can see the progress sun here. Let's go back a couple of, let's go back about a month actually. You've got a toggle button here on the software. Let's go back to February 19th. Okay. No, I think it was actually, sorry, it was the 22nd. Now I'm going to throw up the transit wheel here on the outer wheel. Okay. So here's Pluto here, 25 degrees 51. Here's the Pluto progress sun, 25, 52. Now, if I toggle that, to the next day, which is February 23rd, you can see that would have hit exact somewhere in between that 24-hour period there. So that's February 22nd and 23rd, right? Well, let's go to the Bitcoin price chart here. And oh my, look at that. If I go back over here, what day was that? February 21st, 22nd. This is the 4-hour chart. So if I go back to the daily, let me see here. Got lost. Okay, here we go. Look at that. February 22nd. Boom. That came down from 57.4 and to 45. So a $12,000 move on the daily. It went all the way down to 43. 43 if you count the wick down. So if you count the wick up here, that was 58 to 43. It was a $15,000 move, and that correlated exactly to the 48-hour period of, actually it was really that whole week, but the drop initiated in the 24-hour period that Pluto exactly conjoined the Bitcoin progress sun, not the natal sun. Okay. The natal sun was back in 2014. So we talked about, right, Pluto being about breakdown and destruction, but also regeneration, right? Sorry, let me go back to that, right? But also, regeneration. The price actually recovered after about a week. It quickly recovered and regenerated back to a new high. So this is interesting because this aspect is actually going to happen 4 or 5 more times actually over the next couple of years. So the next one, by the way, is June 19th. And we want to keep an eye on that date, especially in that 48 to 72 hour period there around June 19th, because Pluto's going to retrograde back into the conjunction with the Bitcoin progress sun. And you guys, if you don't know what the progress sun means, you can Google it. I'm not going to go into that today. you can Google progressions, secondary progressions. What does it mean, the progressed sun? What does that mean? It's just the the natal sun is your identity, your core identity structure, right? The progressed sun is moving 1 degree per year as you are evolving, growing, and maturing. So it gives you a sense of your identity as it's actually changing through, as you're growing and changing through life. So it's a very interesting thing to look at your progressed sun. Let's just cover the nodes real quick here, and then we're going to then we'll take a break. I know you guys probably have to go to the bathroom or something, but all right. Let's see here. Are we back? All right. We're back on the slides. The nodes are very important in financial astrology. It's pretty simple. The nodes are actually very complex. Chris Brennan just did an episode on the nodes. You might want to go back and listen to that. It's very recent on the Astrology podcast. Judith Hill has a great book called The Lunar Nodes and You. There's a lot of different books out there. Nodes are actually the most controversial point in astrology in many ways. The different schools of thought, modern versus traditional, Vedic versus Western, have different views on the nodes. In financial astrology, though, I think it's pretty straightforward. The North Node, Rahu, is essentially good. It indicates gains and success, and price go up. So it's good for selling. Whereas the South Node is a point of weakness that indicates problems, dissipation of vitality and wealth, and it indicates losses. Now that, it's all relative, right? So the South Node, it could be good for buyers, whereas the North Node is going to be good for sellers. Now, if you're looking at an assessment, in a natal chart, for example, Link is a coin that we've been following. Why do I like Link so much? Well, number one, it's a great project. Number two, it has a really strong sentiment behind it, right? The Link Marines, it is a very strong, hardcore, devoted, obsessed following. And it's been outperforming coins left and right. Not recently, but over the last couple of years, it's up 3,000%. But in the natal chart of Link, it actually has a conjunction of Venus to the North Node. And as we just explained earlier, Venus is a wealth and money planet, and the North Node adds energy. The North Node adds energy. It strengthens any planet it's next to. So in your natal chart, if you have a planet next to the North Node, that planet is going to be stronger, especially for material success and gains and good fortune, or gains and wealth, fame, or success. The South Node can weaken a planet's vitality. And the South Node isn't all bad, though. The South Node can bring some spiritual blessings and benefits, but that doesn't help. That doesn't really apply in financial astrology so much. So in financial astrology, South Node bad, North Node good. Good for buyers. South Node bad, but maybe good for buyers. Now, the South Node was in Capricorn also in 2018 and 19. We saw as soon as the South Node left Capricorn, that was the end of cheap Bitcoin. Bitcoin really hasn't looked back. So the South Node leaving Capricorn was very important. Another great example in financial astrology. The South Node right now has been in Sagittarius, for a year now. Sagittarius rules international travel, right? Because it's ruled by Jupiter, which also rules foreign cultures, foreign travel, long distance journeys. Sagittarius rules long distance journeys, overseas travel. The South Node is really obstructing international travel right now. Whereas the North Node is in Gemini. Gemini represents short distance journeys, right? So people are going camping more. They're going to local Airbnbs. They're just going to the beach or the mountains. They're not going to Europe. They're not going to Bali. International travel is still really, really shut down because of all the restrictions. This is going to change when the South Node leaves Sagittarius. It will start to change when Jupiter regains dignity in Pisces, but it won't fully change until the South Node leaves Sagittarius and goes into Scorpio. And then the North Node is going to be in Taurus, which we think could be very good for the economy, actually, but maybe too good. that could be a time where we would have to maybe worry about inflation with the North Node adding energy in the wealth sign of Taurus. But the North Node also can indicate greed and lust and addictions. And it can bring great worldly success, but also a chronic dissatisfaction. So we saw Jupiter and Venus conjunction within 2 degrees of the Bitcoin North Node, and we saw an explosion in the price at that time. That was a big favorable. All right, guys, let's Link Marines. Yeah, I'm going to stop my sharing here. It's about 10:50. So let's take a break. Okay, 10:52. Actually, let me take a few questions right here. This would be a good time just while this stuff is still fresh. If anybody has any questions, I'll take 1 or 2 questions just about the planetary material. No questions. Okay, no questions coming through on the chat box here. Any comments or questions before we take a break? We're gonna make an espresso on my new espresso machine. Yes, Leora, why don't you go ahead and either type your question in, or you can unmute yourself and ask it. It's fine. Okay. When you have competing planets, how do you tell which one has a greater influence? Well, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously that's a more advanced. And the question, we have that right now for Bitcoin, right? Jupiter conjunct the Bitcoin Neptune. That looks like, could be euphoria. That could be euphoric confidence, faith, optimism, hopefulness. But at the same time, we know that Neptune is opposing the Bitcoin natal structure, maybe showing weaknesses in the market structure. So, you know, we don't always know. That makes sometimes it makes it, sometimes we just have to say we don't know. It's too confusing. There's too many competing influences, and we don't know how to weight them. Or, as happens too, we try to weight them, but we weight them incorrectly, and our forecast doesn't play out. Remember, our forecasts are really just an educated guess. And sometimes, like in the case of 2019, you know, with Saturn on the Bitcoin Sun in January of 2019, we gave the strong buy signal because we saw Uranus was going to trine the Bitcoin Mars in June of 2019. And we said that's going to be a huge, massive rally. And we were right. And that played out like clockwork. And we made a lot of money. We made 200, 300% gains, which looks nothing now. But at that time, it was huge. You know, and other times like February, we got it wrong. Mercury was retrograde. Uranus was square Saturn. Sometimes there's too many influences and the system just breaks down, and you just have to wait it out. You know, take a wait and see approach, and, you know, wait till you have a clear setup to trade, you know, with real money. It's one thing to predict and make a forecast. It's another thing to trade on it, you know, with confidence. So the answer is we don't always know. It's very tricky. Astrology doesn't give you all the answers. It just gives you a little bit extra information that other traders don't have. And so that can sometimes give you a great edge on the markets, and other times it won't. There's just going to be periods where you don't know what's going to happen. It's not always going to tell you what's going to happen. Sometimes you'll have too many different conflicting signals. And especially if Uranus is involved, you know, forget about it. It's going to be too hard to call. Curious, how do you create the natal chart? Do you do it on the first transaction of a coin or the creation of a coin? Yeah, this is just there's no really definitive answer to that, Jimmy. That's a great question. You know, oftentimes you're going to have 2 or 3 charts. So for example, if you're doing just a regular standard company, you might have the incorporation date, then you might have an IPO date, and then you might have a first trade, you know, chart. For a coin, you might have a genesis block. That's what we use for Bitcoin. We use the genesis block, and it's been very accurate. But for these newer coins, man, it's kind of a nightmare sometimes. You might have a genesis block, then you'll have an ICO, which might come a few weeks later. then the coin might change chains, or there might be a fork, and it's like you end up with 2 or 3 different charts. And so that's one of the reasons that altcoins are so hard to forecast, because uh, you have to just pick a chart, or sometimes you can look at a couple of different charts and see and study them over a period of time and see which is more accurate. So for Bitcoin, we have the Genesis block chart, which I think is pretty definitively accurate. But you might also look at the first trade chart, or the first transaction chart too. So yeah, the incorporation chart might tell you, might give you information about a company that's important, but then the IPO chart might tell you that's when it launches, on an exchange. That's when it becomes a public company that's traded. So that's going to give you a different layer of information that's going to be more applicable to that company moving forward, as a stock, right? So they're different. They're going to be different. Maybe the incorporation chart will tell you more about the internal working of the company. Okay, but yeah, so you have to do a lot of research to find, the Genesis blocks, and this stuff is out there on the blockchains, but sometimes it takes a lot of research. When planets that have strong sextiles, is this a strong indicator that the IPO will do well for the whole transit? I'm not sure what that means, the whole transit. I mean, it really depends on the whole chart. I mean, sextiles are favorable, but we have to see what are the dignity and debilitation look like? Are there squares and oppositions? Strong indicator that if the planet has a strong sextiles. I don't know if you're talking about in the natal chart, but you already got your question, Leora, so I'm going to move on. Do nodes have houses sign preferences like the planets? Yeah, you should go back. That's very complex. Actually, I'm not that knowledgeable about that. That's in Chris Brennan's recent podcast on the nodes. They actually talk about what houses and signs the nodes do the best in. So I would refer you back to Chris Brennan's podcast on the lunar nodes for that. Okay, Lori asks, for a natal chart for crypto, I like to look on the blockchain and use the Genesis 0 block. Then I like to use the block.hair.com or Etherscan.io for Ether tokens. Okay, that's good. Mary asks, do you find the Bitcoin chart influences the direction of the alt charts as well? Yeah, that's a great question, a great point, actually. The altcoin charts are really hit or miss in terms of forecasting, because they just follow Bitcoin a lot of the time. They just do whatever Bitcoin does. So if Bitcoin's going to have a massive correction, altcoins are also going to have a massive correction, despite whatever's going on in the altcoin charts. One of the things I'm really looking at now is confluence between the Ethereum and the Bitcoin chart. When we see that, then we know we have to pay attention. I don't really, I know Marin Altman does a lot of these kind of altcoin predictions. I don't do that. And people always asking me to do altcoin predictions. And the fact of the matter is, it's just really hard to do it, because they're really going to follow the general direction of Bitcoin. Now, sometimes, of course, Bitcoin will just move sideways and the altcoins will pump. And sometimes the natal chart will help us determine that, but a lot of times it won't. So I just really, can't emphasize, really go by Bitcoin's chart. Now, for altcoins, it's great to look. I like looking at their Genesis block chart to assess them, whether I like them or not, as an investment opportunity, and how strong is the project. Like I said, Link, Venus conjunct the natal North Node in Leo is like a great, aspect for that project. So we really like that project. Okay, all right, guys, it's 11 o'clock here. Let's come back at 11:15. Everybody can have a snack and a coffee, go to the bathroom, and then we'll pick it up on the planets. And we're gonna go till about 12:30, and try to just get as much in as we can. As you can see, it's just scratching the surface. What we're gonna do today. There's so much more to it. So All right, guys, we're going to take a little break here. So we'll be back in 15 minutes. I'm just going to let the video run. I'm just going to let the video run for the break. Make it easier for me. All right. It's almost a quarter after again. So I'm back here. Not sure who's back, but hopefully everybody will be coming back here shortly. All right, it's a quarter after. Hopefully everybody is back. And we're gonna talk about the signs here. We're gonna go through the signs pretty quick. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. We're gonna talk about the aspects, and then we'll look at look at some charts, start looking at some charts, price charts and astrology charts. So let me see if I can get on here. So here's my PDF. Here's my PowerPoint, of the signs. And let's see here. Yeah, just want to keep my, all right, guys. Okay, let's see where we are. Hopefully everybody's back here in part 2 of our Intro to Financial Astrology, where we're going to look at the signs of the zodiac. And that also gives us some more information about what's going on. For example, as we said earlier, Venus today, Venus is at the end of Pisces, and tomorrow it's going to go into Aries. Well, that's a big shift. That's a really dramatic shift, right? Because Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, traditionally Jupiter's sign. In modern, it's Neptune. And then it moves into Aries, which is Mars' sign. And Venus doesn't like to be in Mars' sign, and Mars, doesn't like to be in Venus' sign. I mean, this is kind of one of the geniuses of the system, right? I mean, Mars is debilitated in Venus signs, and Venus is debilitated in Mars signs, right? And that just makes intuitive sense. So let's go ahead and look at this. Hopefully everybody can see my PowerPoint here of the signs. And again, this is taken from my basic introduction to astrology course that is available and modified slightly for financial purposes. So Western tropical zodiac signs are based on the seasons, not the constellations. That's called the sidereal zodiac. That is the foundation of the Vedic or Jyotish system. So it's based on the Earth's seasonal orbit around the sun. Today is the first day of Aries, right? Today is the first day of spring. It's 0 degrees Aries, will always be the first day of spring. It doesn't have to do with the stars or the constellation of Aries. Cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, always start the solstices and the equinoxes, and Aries will always be the first day of spring. The cardinal signs begin the seasons, the fixed signs are the heart of the season, and the mutable signs are the ending of a season when the seasons start to change. So you have to understand that rhythm and the logic. If you want to understand the signs, you have to understand 3 things about the signs. Okay, 5 things. To understand the signs, you have to understand 5 things about the signs. Number 1, the sign totem. What is the archetypal, representative of that sign? So for Aries, it's the ram. Well, that tells us something about that sign. The animal is just a representation of energy. Okay, it's a poetry. It's telling us a poetic story about the sign. Aries puts its head down and charges forward for what it wants, right? As we saw, Mars was in Aries for almost 6 months in the second half of 2021. In financial astrology, that actually ended up being an incredibly strong bull market for both stocks and cryptocurrencies, with a few glitches here and there, especially when Mars was retrograde for stocks, and for crypto. Actually, we did see a correction, but all in all, Mars in Aries was very confident. Of course, Mars has the dignity in Aries, and the sun going into Aries is exalted, right? A big fireball in the sky of the sun. It's getting stronger, right? I want you to think about these intuitively and understand these connections. Why is the sun exalted in Aries? The sun is a fireball. Aries is a fire sign. The sun is getting stronger. Spring is coming, right? Thus, the sun has exaltation here. The sun rules Leo. Okay, that's the heart of the summer, the most warmest part of the year, at least in the northern hemisphere. You can see that just makes intuitive sense, right? Whereas the sun has debilitation in Aquarius, the heart of winter, right? The sun is at its weakest point. So these things make sense. The sun is also debilitated in Libra, right? In Venus's sign. Why? The opposite. It's in its fall in Libra, the opposite of its exaltation in Aries, because Aries is a sign of self-confidence and the self, the individual, which is what the sun is. The sun is our individual identity. Whereas Libra is all about love and marriage and the needs of the other, sensitivity to the needs of the other person. That's not that great for the sun. The sun is our own personal identity. So you can see that these things make sense on multiple levels. And these are really important to understanding, astrology, and thus understanding financial astrology. So the sign totem, the ruling planet, Aries is ruled by Mars, the god of war. Aries and Mars are basically the same, the different names for the same thing, right? Mars is the I can't remember which. Aries, I think, is the Greek, and Mars is the Roman god of war. They're both the same god of war. Aries is a battle sign. It's about confrontation, competition, conflict, and actually literally war. It's also a high confidence sign. The element of the sign is also extremely important, whether it's air, fire, earth, or water. Earth signs, tend to be more related to the material world and to wealth, especially in the case of Taurus and Capricorn. Those have to do with business, money, markets, finance, and wealth. Virgo, less so, but Virgo's still an earth sign. The triplicity, whether it's cardinal, fixed, or mutable, cardinal signs are good at new beginnings and launching new projects. Fixed signs are good for continuity. They have a tenacity, and they're able to work over long periods of time and stay focused on the similar project. on the same project for a long period of time, where cardinal signs aren't. Cardinal signs get bored easily. They want to launch a new project, then hand it off to a fixed sign, and then launch a new project, another new project. Mutable signs are flexible and adaptable. So Aries is a cardinal sign. It's the ultimate cardinal sign. In fact, it rules new beginnings. And that's one of the reasons I decided to launch my astrology educational series is today, because of the sun exalted in Aries, a new beginning. We're starting a whole new series of educational financial astrology and astrology coursework that I hope to continue throughout the year and into the years to come. Also, there's a yin-yang correspondence to the signs. Masculine, feminine. Aries is a yang, masculine sign, right? One of the most interesting, just as an example, one of the most interesting examples of this was that Scorpio is Mars's feminine sign. Well, and Scorpio is about secrets. Okay, when Jupiter went into Scorpio, that was the year of the Me Too movement. I can't remember exactly what year it was. It was like, what it was, 2016 or whatever it was. But secrets came out into the open, right? Jupiter likes to bring stuff out into the open, so it didn't really like the secrets. So all these skeletons in the closet of all these people, and it really strengthened the feminine. It gave women's voices a much more strength when Jupiter was in Scorpio. So that's just one example. But let's go through these. Okay, I'm gonna just skip a bit here, the cardinal signs. I mean, you guys can go back and look over this stuff. Here's all the glyphs. Now, of course, it's really important to learn the glyphs, all right? Astrology is a language. Of course, it's great to understand the theory. Today was really about theory, not so much we're gonna be practice, right? First, you have to understand the basic theories here. Don't worry, we'll do more workshops. Like I said, we're going to launch like a more comprehensive series of, probably going to take 5 or 6 or even 7 classes, 2-hour classes to really get into how to bring the theory into practice, how to look for trading setups, how to actively trade with astrological factors. But this is first, we have to go through this stuff, right? So learning the glyphs, you have to learn the glyphs of the sign. You're not going to be able to read a chart unless you can read the glyphs. It doesn't have the names on the chart. So the god of war, this picture is very illustrative of the sign of Aries. It's not conflict averse. It's going to go out and get what it wants. It's not rational. It's not analytical. It's instinctual. It's intuitive. It goes with a gut feeling. And it puts its head down and it charges forward, and it's very confident sign. Planets, Mars and the sun do the best here. Jupiter can do well here too. Venus doesn't do well here. Now, an interesting example of this was Venus, actually the global liquidity crisis of March 2020, February and late March 2020. Was when Venus was debilitated in Aries, and it happened to square the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. That was the dominant aspect of last year. And that was what triggered the market crash, was that Saturn in Aries, debilitated in Aries, it started squaring Saturn and Pluto, and that's when the markets really started tumbling hard for about 3 to 4 weeks. Well, Venus is going into Aries tomorrow. Now it's not going to square Saturn and Pluto because that conjunction isn't active in 2021, but it is going to square Pluto, I believe, in April, actually, around April 10th, 11th, 12th. So that's a period that we're a little worried about in terms of seeing pullbacks across global markets. Venus debilitated and combust the sun, which is something I didn't really talk about. But when a planet gets close to the sun, it's said to be damaged by the hot rays of the sun. Now, Venus's exaltation in Pisces protected it to some degree from the combustion to the sun. Okay, this is a little more advanced, right? I'm not sure how many people are following this stuff, but now it's going into Aries. Okay, a sign that it doesn't do well in. It's not comfortable in Mars's sign. Now it loses its protection, and the combustion of the sun becomes a factor. How big a factor, I don't know. We'll see tomorrow. But what we're more concerned about is the combust the sun, debilitated in Aries and square to Pluto. Pluto represents breakdowns. Then later, maybe regeneration when Venus goes into Taurus, its own home wealth sign, and that's in later in April. So this is how the signs, come into play here. Now, when we talk about the aspects, you'll have to understand that the aspects are really related to the signs. Okay, so whoops, Aries, financial. You can go over this when we send you the PDFs. Mars rules aggression, conflict, action-oriented, courage, not afraid of battle and competition, new beginnings, and doesn't fare well with long, drawn-out projects. In financial astrology, it's a sign of strong vitality and confidence and courage. Mars in Aries was very strong for stocks and cryptocurrencies in 2020. It won't come back there for another 2 years. Aries has a high risk tolerance for trading and investing. If you're looking at your own natal chart and you have 4 planets in Aries, well, maybe you're willing to take big risks. You're courageous, you're confident, but maybe you need some help on risk management. Wealth planet Venus is debilitated, doesn't do well in Aries. And as we said, we already talked about this. Taurus is our favorite sign, right? It's the bull. Kind of interesting there. I don't know, maybe you guys all already made this connection, but bull markets, okay, Taurus is a wealth sign. The bull is a wealth symbol. And Venus rules Taurus. So again, what are our 5 things, right? Venus is Taurus is ruled by the bull. Now, the bull is actually really different from the ram. You might think, oh, well, that's actually kind of similar, right? No, they're totally different. The bull, the ram is very aggressive and has to fight to get what it wants. The bull actually likes to just sit around and eat grass. Taurus is a sign of peace and prosperity. It's also a fixed sign. Here's the glyph for Taurus. It's a sign of stability and material security, peace and material wealth. And it's the sign of fertility. It's a very fertile sign for wealth and for agriculture. It's the most stable, down-to-earth, practical sign in the zodiac, but it's also it's very loyal, but also a bit rigid and stubborn, change averse. Concerned, mainly very practical sign, concerned with the material world, right? It's the opposite of Pisces. Ruled by Venus, it likes luxury and comfort and the good things in life. So for those of you out there who have Venus in Taurus, okay, Venus, dignity in Taurus, this is the ultimate wealth placement. Now, of course, there might be other things. It doesn't mean if you have Venus in Taurus, you're going to be extremely wealthy. You could, the potential is there. It maybe also depends on other factors. Where is your Venus placed? Where is your Jupiter placed? What does your second house look like? We're not even really going to get into the houses today. The second house is associated with Taurus and wealth. The 6th house is work. The 10th house is career, money through career. The 8th house is a difficult house of loss and problems with other people's money. What are the other factors in your chart? But just if you have Venus in Taurus, that's good. If you have Jupiter in Taurus, those are wealth placements, okay? When you have the wealth planets lining up with the wealth signs, then that's indicative of more potential for wealth. Jupiter in Sagittarius, is very good actually for wealth too. Could be, depending on the other placements there. So rules banking and money. Okay, so one of the things right now in financial astrology is Uranus. Uranus, the planet of high tech, the revolutionary disruption, sudden unpredictable changes, transformations, is in Taurus, right? This is one of the most paradoxical placements in astrology is Uranus in Taurus. This is changing. Uranus is changing how we think about money, okay? Not only through technological innovations like cryptocurrencies, but also through quantitative easing and the central banks. They're changing how markets, businesses, and money operates. This is a relatively new thing that started after the financial crisis of 2008, when the central banks started, buying the troubled assets. In that case, it was more about those real estate, those real estate aspects. I'm forgetting what those were called, but where they packaged the real estate mortgage debt, collateralized mortgage debt, and the central bank started buying that to basically stabilize the markets. Well, now they've taken that idea and now they're buying corporate, bonds, and they're supporting the markets that way. And they're essentially putting money into the markets to stabilize, create liquidity, and stabilize the markets. So the central banks, this is all happening under, Uranus and Taurus, and Uranus is really just changing how markets work. And also, I think Uranus is very strong for this cryptocurrency revolution. I mean, cryptocurrencies have been really bullish ever since Uranus entered Taurus in, I think it was late March and early April of 2019 when it entered for good. And that's really when Bitcoin came out of that kind of long bear market period of 2018. And, we had a few bad months there at the end of 2019, but essentially Bitcoin has been essentially in a bull market ever since Uranus went into Taurus. So these are kind of more big picture, right? Uranus in Taurus is square Saturn in Aquarius for all of 2021. So that's the big picture aspect that's in play for 2021, okay, that we're looking at in terms of trying to understand, financial markets in 2021. And we've seen, that's a really volatile, unpredictable alignment, right? Because it's Uranus is squaring Taurus. So Taurus is trying to limit Uranus is squaring Saturn. Saturn's trying to limit Uranus, but Uranus is trying to break the restrictions of Saturn, the traditional old guard. But you're seeing these new revolutionary movements like the Wall Street bets and the whole GameStop phenomenon and these NFTs. Like, a lot of innovations are coming out right now, the non-fungible tokens that people are selling art through cryptocurrencies. But we're seeing really weird volatility in markets. We saw, big pumps through Wall Street bets, big pumps in the cannabis and in crypto, followed by really sharp pullbacks and crashes. This is really synonymous with the Uranus-Saturn square. And that's going to continue. The next one is in June, and then the third one is in December, but it's really in effect the whole year. Anyway, just kind of giving a little big picture there. Okay, we're going to kind of keep moving here to Gemini, the sign of the twins, Castor and Pollux. Gemini is really different. It's mutable air. It's ruled by Mercury, the sign of knowledge, information, curiosity, and intelligence, and logical analysis. So for financial, Gemini rules information technologies. The North Node is in Gemini right now. Computer tech, traditional and social media, and of course news events. And it also rules travel, actually, like local travel, short distance journeys. Let me write that in. So whereas Sagittarius, the opposite sign, rules long distance journeys, Gemini rules the short distance, going across town, going across the state. Whereas Jupiter, and Sagittarius rule, going to Europe or going to Asia, longer distance journeys there. So yeah, Gemini, like the wind, is able to cover a great deal very quickly, but it often lacks a deeper perspective. In many respects, it's the opposite of Taurus. It tends to quicken the energy of the planets. So we've got Mars is in Gemini right now, approaching the North Node. Jupiter's actually debilitated here in the opposite from its rulership. Gemini is more about information, more detail-oriented sign. And Jupiter likes that big picture visionary. Cancer, here's the, the crab, the hard shell. you know, Cancer, essentially for financial astrology, it rules homes, land, and real estate. I'm going to keep it simple here for that one. Obviously, it's emotional awareness and connection and security. So if you see someone in their chart is ruled by the moon, like I said, Jupiter's exalted here. You know, those would be special placements if you have one of those placements in your chart, or if you're assessing an asset and you see that placement in the chart, that would be, you know, favorable, right? Okay, Leo is the lion. This is the glyph for Leo. Fixed fire ruled by the sun. Confidence, sign of ego, pride, and self-confidence. Self-expression and admiration here. The sun is exalted. Excuse me. The sun has rulership here. Excuse me. And Saturn is debilitated actually here in Leo. Financial, it rules gold actually, because gold is a shiny yellow metal, and the sun is also shiny and yellow. So there's a correspondence there, and so the Leo is said to rule gold, and of course for, you know, millennia, gold was considered the king of financial assets, right? Especially in pre-modern times. Maybe Bitcoin is the new king, we could say, you know, potentially, you know, Bitcoin's the king of cryptocurrencies. So Leo might actually have some effect on Bitcoin. It also rules politics and heads of state. So if you have eclipses or major aspects that have to do with Leo, you could say that that maybe has some effect on the political situation or the head of state of a country. You often see politicians will have either a Leo sun or a Leo rising, or some emphasis on Leo. Leo is very regal, dignified sign also. Leo, because Leo is ruled by the sun, and the sun is the center of the universe, the galaxy, excuse me, not the solar system. Leo is a kind of a special sign. You know, Leo is a sign of dignity, of great dignity, and it's a very dignified, regal, you know, sign. And of course, this, like we said, the sun has a rulership there. Virgo is the Virgin. In financial astrology, it doesn't really play that big a role. Together with Taurus, it rules agriculture. The wealth planets Venus and Jupiter are both debilitated here in Virgo. So not really a wealth-oriented sign in some ways. Mercury is either has rulership or exaltation, depending on the system you're using. So of course, Mercury has dignity here. So Mercury, placement of Mercury here would be very strong, both by transit and also in any natal chart. Libra is the scales ruled by Venus. This is the glyph. Libra rules, I mean, you know, there's other correspondences. I'm kind of going through these pretty quickly. This is a like superficial approach here, but Libra is more of a love sign, right? Libra rules relationships, marriage, social, you know, interpersonal relationships, intimacy, love, marriage. But Libra rules art as an investment. So if you have Venus in Libra, you might have an especially acute, you know, sense of taste and beauty. You really, also Venus in Pisces has a very refined taste. Venus in Taurus or Libra or Pisces all are famous for good taste. Maybe you can run an art gallery, right? Maybe you have a connoisseur, or you be able to showcase other people's art, or maybe you have great creativity yourself with this placement. But Venus in Libra knows what's beautiful and what's not. It has a great sense of taste. And so, yeah, and Libra rules artistic creativity and art as an investment. Scorpio is ruled by Mars and Pluto. Now, Scorpio financial, you know, Scorpio likes to dig deep underneath the surface of things. And thus also there's a correspondence here to gold and silver and precious metals diamonds and gems and crystals and all sorts of things like that that are underneath the earth. You know, I don't really, Scorpio is opposite of wealth sign Taurus, but Scorpio rules the underworld, and there can be great riches can be found in digging underneath the earth into the underworld. So there is some correspondence there. Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, which is a wealth planet, making Sagittarius a lucky, good fortune wealth sign. It's the archer. It's aiming high, has very high ideals. This is a mutable fire sign. And yeah, this is luck. It's a wealth sign in general, and rules international travel, foreign cultures, foreign travel. It's the half man, half beast, the marriage of instinct and passion with a higher understanding. You know, Sagittarius is a big picture visionary sign. It's like the academic philosopher. And, you know, Jupiter here, if you see Jupiter in Sagittarius, that's a very strong placement for good luck and abundance. I mean, most planets here, except for Saturn, you know, are going to do well. They're going to have a more happy-go-lucky. Maybe not Mercury is debilitated here. Saturn is not good here. You know, Venus is not bad here. The Sun is good here. Mars is good here. Jupiter is good here. Jupiter is especially good, right? With Dignity, I just did a reading for one of my students. He has Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 4th house. Okay, that tells me that the 4th house is home and family. There's something special about his family. His family may have been an aristocratic family, or maybe he has a famous ancestors or a famous family last name, and he may have a wealth in homes, land, or real estate. So these kind of things, you know, come into play here when we're looking at doing financial readings. Capricorn, you know, is maybe one of the more enigmatic signs. The sea goat, like what's a sea goat, right? It's a mythical thing. It's interesting because, right, it swims in the ocean, but it also climbs high up in the mountains too. And Capricorn is really a sign of ambition, material success. It wants the fame and fortune and wealth and material success. And in that way, it's a wealth sign, but very difficult from, very different from Sagittarius, which is more like a happy-go-lucky sign. Sagittarius is like a optimism, good fortune, things come easily for Sagittarius. For Capricorn, hard work, success comes through hard work, discipline, and focus. It's very different. But Capricorn is the sign of business and markets, and so it has an innate understanding. It's also the only sign that has 3 different glyphs. They're all similar, but makes it a little bit more enigmatic. Again, it's a very enigmatic, you know, animal, a mythological animal, but it also has these 3 different glyphs. It's obviously ruled by Saturn, right? So it emphasizes hard work, discipline, focus, boundaries, structure, stability. These are the qualities that are valued by Capricorns. Reliability, you know. It's a wealth sign as it has a very savvy business sense for business and markets, managing money, trading, buying, you know, buying low and selling high. That's the Capricorn has an innate kind of sense of how to value things and make money, trading and investing, how to run a business and manage people. Capricorn is a sign of structure and authority, governments, large institutional structures, organizational skill, management of large institutions. And again, success through hard work. Capricorn is a sign of ambition. Bitcoin has 4 planets in Capricorn, okay? Mars exalted, and the Sun, and Pluto, very fierce. This is a fierce warrior. I talked about this also in Chris Brennan's podcast. This is it wants to dominate financial markets. It's very ambitious. It will not be stopped. So that's how the sign give us more information about what Bitcoin is doing. You know, I saw the Mars, Pluto, and Sun stellium in Capricorn. This thing is the Terminator, and it's going to take over financial markets sooner or later. So success. And it's a very traditional, actually, it's a very traditional sign that really respects traditional values. It's also associated with pagan earth-based spirituality as well. So it can be spiritually ambitious as well. I mean, we think of it as a materially oriented sign, but Capricorn, if it is spiritually awakened and spiritually aware, can actually be a sign of great spiritual accomplishment. Although that's somewhat less common. It is an earth sign that tends to be more focused on material security, right? The opposing sign is Cancer, which has to do with emotional security. And for Cancer is really like a nice home, right? They're really oriented towards homes, land, and real estate. And Capricorn really needs wealth. It really needs material security. So very similar to Taurus in that way. In that they both share, that really need, they're both very practical, hardworking signs that have a strong need for material security. And so there is some overlap there. But Capricorn is a much more serious, disciplined sign than Taurus is. Aquarius is the water bearer, of course. Aquarius is ruled, another very enigmatic sign because it's ruled traditionally by Saturn, which is in some ways an awkward rulership because, we think of Uranus as, we think of Taurus as, Aquarius, as being very freedom loving and originality and uniqueness, which is not so much like Saturn. And but yet Aquarius also can be very kind of fixed and stubborn, okay, like Saturn. And Aquarius in the dead of winter can be kind of cold, and there's an aloofness about Aquarius that's also very much like Saturn. So there's actually a lot more correspondence with Saturn than meets the eye, I think. Now the modern ruler is Uranus. He's wearing the glyph here of Aquarius in his necklace. The modern ruler is Uranus, which is more about freedom and originality and creative brilliance and innovation and futuristic new technologies, which Aquarius also rules. I think of Aquarius very much as ruling high technology and futuristic technologies for the betterment of the human, collective. We'll put that in here. For the betterment of humanity. The problem is that Aquarius it's geared towards the betterment of humanity, but it's awareness of like individual people. They say, Aquarius loves humanity. It just doesn't like people that much. So you might see these kind of AI algorithms that are really supposed to like move forward into this high-tech future for the betterment of humanity. But actually on a practical individual level, they're kind of soul crushing. That's actually kind of an Aquarian problem. Aquarius can also be very rigid ideologies, which I think we're seeing with Saturn. I mean, we've been seeing actually for some time, but we saw in terms of financial astrology, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the great conjunction, it happens every 20 years, happened at 0 degrees Aquarius on, I think it was December 20th or whatever it was, December 21st. And that was a historic shift, not only it was a Jupiter-Saturn, conjunction in Aquarius, but it was a 200-year shift out of the earth signs of that conjunction. And now for the next 200 years, that conjunction will be in air signs. And I think that cryptocurrencies, this was like flip the switch for cryptocurrencies, right? I mean, cryptocurrencies have just gone ballistic ever since this great conjunction in late December. And I think this is ushering in, potentially a new era in global finance of this kind of Aquarian age where Bitcoin will be, the first ever global internet currency that transcends national currencies and banks and corporations, right? I mean, I think Bitcoin very much is a money, it's a money for the people. It's a global internet currency that transcends these kind of limitations of individual nation states. And in that way, it's very Aquarian, okay? And it's also very Aquarian in that this is an air sign, right? Whereas the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions of the last 200 years were in earth signs, right? So gold, silver, like from the earth. I mean, even paper money, you touch it with your hands, it's more earth, more earthy. But we slowly, been moving off the gold standard, right? Then to credit cards, like plastic, okay, with a chip. And then now, essentially just you're sending it through the air. It's just digital, right? It doesn't even exist on the earthy material practical plane, right? Ethereum, you're literally sending it through the ether, okay? This is Aquarian. This is Aquarian air sign energy that we're seeing. And this is a 20-year cycle that we've just entered in December. So just trying to bring that in. And then the final sign in the zodiac, of course, is Pisces. It's a water sign. And very much like Neptune, it's very much about transcendence of the material world, transcendence of the material practical concerns. It's not a wealth sign, but it rules water resources, right? Because it's associated with rivers, lakes, the oceans, and water, okay? And it's said to rule oil also. So not a wealth sign, but on the other hand, it's more of a spiritual sign, right? Pisces is about transcendence of the self to connect with a higher spiritual consciousness, to connect with God, to attain enlightenment, these kind of things like that. It's a romantic, poetic sign. It's a big picture visionary sign, though. And Jupiter, of course, has dignity here. So Jupiter is a wealth planet. And so Jupiter having dignity here is potentially good for markets and the economy. Okay, so that concludes our section on the signs. I'll take one or two questions, and then we're gonna look at the charts of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, and kind of just do a little bit, put this into practice a little bit, and look at some things, from a more practical standpoint. The practice of financial astrology. So let me, go ahead and you can put some questions in there, and let me see. Let's see here. I think this is the screen I want to share. I'm going to go right back to my software program here. And okay, how high do you think Bitcoin price can potentially go? So this isn't really a Bitcoin forecast. You'll have to join my Patreon if you're not already on there for those kind of Bitcoin forecast stuff. I'm not going to really get into that. This is about learning financial astrology. I'll talk a little bit about Bitcoin, when we look at the charts and what's coming up. But that's a little bit, Sarah, that's a little outside, the purview of this class. I mean, if you are, if you're not already subscribing to my email subscriptions and my Patreon, we've made some price calls. We're really looking at this period of May through July right now to see a strong rally, and then we'll see where we're at, in May, June, and July. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make a forecast this video. A price forecast specifically for Bitcoin right now. Okay, so let me go back into my share. It's more like if you have any questions about like the signs or the planets or anything we've kind of gone over in the class today so far. Those are the kind of questions I wanna answer. Let me just see if there's any more questions coming through here. Okay, for a natal chart for crypto, I like to look on the. Oh, sorry, I'm looking way back here. Okay, all right. So let me let's get the chart of Bitcoin up here, and kind of put this all together, right? Now that we've looked at some of this stuff. Now that we've looked at the planets and the signs, we have to talk about the aspects, right? And we're just the basic aspects are the conjunction, which means when the planets come together, in the same sign, in the same few degrees of the same sign. Then you have the sextile, which is 60 degrees apart, so 2 signs over. Okay, those are harmonious. Then you have the square, which is a 90-degree aspect. That's a more challenging, edgy, difficult, not necessarily bad, depends on the aspects. It could be bad. Then you have the trine, which is 120 degrees. That's a very favorable aspect. So like, as I said, Uranus, transiting Uranus is in a trine to the Bitcoin natal Mars and Sun right now. And that's very favorable for Bitcoin. Then you have the opposition, which is a more challenging. Right now, we've got Neptune is in an opposition at 21 Pisces to the Bitcoin natal Saturn down here at 21 Virgo. So we think that's going to be actually quite challenging. Neptune hard aspects can be quite challenging. So here's the Bitcoin natal. Here's the Bitcoin natal chart. Again, this is based on the Genesis block, which is time-stamped for 6:15 GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, January 3rd, 2009. We don't know if it's in London. We think it's in London, but we don't really know. That would give us an 8-degree Leo ascendant, but we just don't know if that's true. There are other people. Maren Altman is using a New York location. Another Christine Skinner is using a Sydney, Australia location. Some people are using Tokyo or San Francisco. There's a lot of disagreement about location. So we can't really use the ascendant or the houses in this case. So as I said, we see Bitcoin, we look at the chart, Bitcoin has a Sun, Mars, Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which is fiercely competitive in financial markets. It has a good business sense. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, a very strong Mars, and conjunct Pluto, okay? So that, that indicates something that is fiercely, ruthlessly competitive. Pluto is power, and Mars is competition, conflict, courage, and getting your needs met, attainment of your goals. This is something that has a lot of confidence, and it's a bulldozer. It's going to push all obstacles out of its way until its goals are achieved, okay? It's highly ambitious. Capricorn is a sign of ambition and greatness. It wants to achieve great things. And so that's very favorable, right? 3 planets in Capricorn, 4 Jupiter's in Capricorn. Now Jupiter's debilitated in Capricorn, so that's not necessarily that good there. Venus, we also see, is exalted in Pisces, also very good. Because Venus represents money and wealth, and so Venus exalted, and it's in a nice sextile here. So 0 degrees Pisces to 1 degree Pluto, that's essentially a 59 degrees, right? So it's within what we call the orb for a sextile. So that tells us information that's valuable. Now, as we said, also Uranus and Saturn are in an opposition. So that indicates volatility, because Uranus represents dramatic, sudden, unexpected changes, and Saturn represents structure and stability. So Uranus is always kind of disrupting the structure and stability here of Saturn in this relationship. So that's that's kind of we looked at the chart. When I first looked at this chart, I said, wow, holy shit, this is an amazingly powerful chart with the Mars Pluto, particularly the Mars Pluto Sun in Capricorn. Just right off the bat, just looking at this chart, this is a very strong, it's very fierce and ambitious, and it is going to win the game. Okay, it's not gonna. It's an unstoppable force. I mean, Mars Pluto is essentially an unstoppable force. If it was this would be a great chart for a professional athlete or like a martial artist, or you see very strong, for instance, Mars Pluto square aspect in the charts of like Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali, right? Some of the greatest fighters. So Mars Pluto, and then you see Mars Pluto trines in the charts of like I said earlier, LeBron James and Tom Brady, some of the most competitive and successful athletes of the 21st century. Mars-Pluto conjunction, I think the only one I can remember off the top of my head is Paul McCartney, actually. Of course, one of the most successful musicians of the 20th century, and had a huge falling out with, you know, John Lennon and George Harrison, and because he was really hard to get along with, and they ended up in a long legal lawsuit. So he was very competitive. I think he was always competing with John Lennon. Anyway, getting a little off the topic here, but just to give some examples. So, you know, in terms of, you know, looking for trading setups, right, this is where we're looking, you know, at the transits. So the transiting planets, now if I throw up the outer wheel here, you know, this is one way of kind of looking at it. You have an astrological software. The outer wheel shows you the transits. You can also look at like an ephemeris also is another way of looking at it, the planetary positions. So, you know, let's look at what's going on in the Bitcoin chart. Let me see here. Sorry, I just need to fix something. Okay. All right. So, you know, big picture, you know, we think this market is really, you know, bullish. And one of the ways we're seeing that is Uranus, as I've said. Uranus, you know, is disrupting global finance in Taurus. And it's making, right now, you can see it's at 8 degrees Taurus, right? It's making a trine to both the Bitcoin Mars at 5 Capricorn and 13 Capricorn. When it hits 9, you know, it'll be an exactly kind of equally trine to both the Mars and the Sun, right? Now the trines, we talked about, the trines are always, I mean, they're always going to be in the same element, right? So you've got Uranus in the Earth sign of Taurus is making a trine to the Earth sign of Capricorn. That's trines are always going to be in the same element. Sometimes you'll get these what we call out of sign trines, out of sign elements. That's a, you know, like for example, Bitcoin Venus, you know, is at 0 degrees Pisces, right? So 0 Cancer would be the trine, but you know, 29 Gemini is also trine. That would be more out of sign. But in general, you know, the squares and oppositions are always going to be in the same what we call quadruplicities, right? So squares, they'll always be fixed from one fixed sign to another, or one mutable sign to another, or one cardinal sign to another. Trines will always be from the same element. So the trines and the sextiles, the trine is that 120 degree aspect, but we'll give it like you know, and generally we give it about a 3 to 5 degree, or maybe even in a natal chart, you could go out to 8 or 9 degrees. In terms of financial astrology, we're looking specifically for when it goes exact in the same degree. And so if we see here, you know, I'll show you kind of two things that we're really waiting for Bitcoin. Okay. And people who have been following my, you know, my live streams and my forecast reports, they already know this, you know, which is we're waiting for, well, one thing we're waiting for actually right now here is, you know, just around March 27th, Jupiter is going to conjunct the Bitcoin Neptune in the same degree of 22 degrees. So that, you know, anytime Jupiter makes a conjunction, it can bring wealth and prosperity and good fortune. So we're looking at that. But as we already said, at the same time, Neptune is going to be opposing the Bitcoin natal Saturn by degree here, and that adds an element of confusion and potentially weakness. So this is kind of complex when you have those two overlapping aspects. But when we think it gets less complex, and this is what we really think, this is what we think the astrology is really telling us right now, is not the short-term picture of the next few days or few weeks, but it's really the next couple months when Venus here goes to 0 degrees Pisces, because it's going to conjunct the Bitcoin Venus, right? So Venus is a wealth planet. Jupiter's a wealth planet. Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So we're really looking forward to this. We've got some big, you know, we've got some big we do have some, you know, we have a bullish bias. We have some expectations that this would be very favorable, right? Now, the future is always uncertain, you know. I'm not a financial advisor. Nobody can predict the future with 100% certainty, right? This is just an educated guess. You know, we have to see how it plays out. So I'm not, you know, I want to make sure that people understand that there's always an element of risk here, that these signals don't play out the way we think. But, you know, overall and generally, this is a very favorable aspect. Not only will Jupiter regain dignity, okay, which could be just a general favorable for financial markets in general, but it's also specifically in the Bitcoin chart, making this conjunction to the natal Venus, which also has dignity by exaltation. So, you know, this is just a very favorable setup for a trade. The risk reward here is great. And then, you know, Jupiter's going to go to 1 degree Pisces, and it's going to make a sextile to the Bitcoin Pluto. So this is a trading setup for, especially for long-term investors who have been following us and have been holding. We're expecting, you know, some good returns, hopefully, on this aspect setup. Then in June, you know, Uranus is going to hit 13 degrees here around the middle of June. And so it's going to be what we call partile, or in the same degree, right? 13 degrees Taurus is going to make a trine here to 13 degrees Capricorn, the Bitcoin natal sun at 13 degrees Capricorn. So we really like that aspect because we know that Bitcoin trine, especially the first trine of Uranus to the Bitcoin natal Mars in June of 2019, you know, brought that amazing, you know, 300% rally in 2019 and brought a lot of excitement back into the markets. Well, we think this is a similar thing here. So this is why we're so excited about May and June for Bitcoin to rally. Now we do have a concern. We do have a concern here, and let's go back here. Let me just go. I'm going to go back. Actually, there's a couple of things that happen are very similar to February. First of all, if we go, Uranus and Saturn are going to have their second square that they had the first one in February. And that's around June 14th or 15th. So that's one thing. And then I want to bring up the progressions again. And then we're going to add the transit wheel again. Right. Now remember Pluto conjuncted the Bitcoin sun, right, on February 22nd, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, exactly, you know, to the exact degree, and we got a $15,000 drop. Well, let's scoot ahead here, you know, back again to June. Whoops, there we go. And we want to go to June 19th. And we can see here that once again, the Bitcoin progress sun, which we talked about, right? That's the unfolding evolution of the identity of Bitcoin. Well, right here on June 19th, retrograding Pluto is once again going to be exactly conjunct the Bitcoin progress sun, that same signal that saw that $15,000 drop. So we want to pay attention to that. That might bring a really high volatility over a couple of days. Now, it's really interesting because in a lot of ways it's similar. You've got this happened in February, 6 to 7 days after the Uranus-Saturn square was exact. And then Mercury also changed directions. In June, this also happens again, 4 days after the Uranus-Saturn square is exact. Almost exactly the same as February. Mercury is also retrograde during this month of June. Okay, very, very similar to February. But there's one big difference. Uranus is a partile trine to the Bitcoin sun. So there's a lot of strength there continuing. So this is a you know, complex. We've got Uranus trine the Bitcoin natal sun for almost the entire month of June and even into July. But then for a few days, we've got Pluto conjunct the Bitcoin progress sun. And as we know, Pluto represents breakdown, destruction. but then regeneration and evolution. So rebirth. So June, I think, is going to be a very, very complicated month. We think Bitcoin's going to do very well, but be careful for extremely high volatility. Maybe we'll see $15,000 to $20,000 moves in both directions. Okay, so and then this trine. So this trine from Neptune to the Bitcoin natal sun, right? That we talked about. Now that's the. Oh, there we go. No, this is the progress chart. Oh, there's the, okay. There's the natal chart. So this actually goes all the way through April. Let's throw up that transit wheel there. And I'm just going to do this 1 month at a time. Okay, so let's go back to June, and we see that Uranus makes that trine to the Bitcoin natal sun, right? From 13 Taurus to 13 Capricorn. Perfect 120-degree angle. Very favorable for excitement, sudden, unexpected, moves, very dramatic moves that change the market landscape. We could see, it's possible we could see $100,000 by June or July on this aspect. It's a possibility. Not saying it will happen for sure. Maybe 75,000, maybe 100,000. Maybe it goes completely ballistic and goes up to 125,000. I mean, Uranus is really unexpected. It could have a big blow off top there, even if it's only for a few days. Now this is in effect, though. This is just the first trine of Uranus. This is really about a 9 to 10 month period. You get a second retrograde trine in October. We don't know, how strong that retrograde trine will be. But the basic gist is, there's going to be a lot of other aspects here, but it comes back into a trine again, essentially in mid-April. And so that's in effect. That trine is actually in effect for 9 months. Okay, Uranus is approaching this perfect trine to the Bitcoin sun. Now it's at 8 degrees, so it's 5 degrees out, but it's still, there's an effect. It went to 10 degrees last August. And then it started retrograding back to 6, and now it's moving ahead. So this trine of Uranus is in effect all the way through April. And then the other thing that you get, is that I said before, and this is just a really big picture stuff, right? Not the trying to day trade this stuff. This is more for the long-term investors who are looking for, when should I sell, a long-term investment. So remember here in early January of 2022, Jupiter goes back into Pisces. It conjuncts the Bitcoin Venus, and Uranus is approaching that trine to the Bitcoin sun. And then, Jupiter's going to make sextiles to the Bitcoin, Pluto, Mars, and the sun, actually into March. So you can see here in early March or in late February, Jupiter would be at 13 Pisces, and that's gonna sextile the Bitcoin sun. So we think that period between January and April looks also good for a bullish rally continuation. Now, we don't know if there's a huge correction somewhere, and that could be a rebound rally. Doesn't mean it just goes straight up the whole time, right? Okay, so let's just mix it up a little bit here. I think we're kind of coming to the end of the workshop, so I want to look at some other things real quick. Let's look at Ethereum really quick here. The Ethereum natal chart. Ethereum natal chart, I think I don't like anywhere near as much as Bitcoin. I don't think it has the same potential as Bitcoin. You do have a very beneficial Jupiter Venus conjunction here. Now, if we don't know if this location is right, we have the location of Vancouver, British Columbia, which is where I think Vitalik is located, right? But there's also an Ethereum headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland. So where did the blockchain go live, right? If this Vancouver chart is right, then you've got, first of all, Venus and Jupiter in the 12th house, which is not that great. Jupiter's pretty good in Leo, but Venus is debilitated in Virgo. So that's somewhat problematic. It's also in a square to Saturn. Jupiter at 27, Leo is in a square to Saturn. So it means like you have great potential for abundance, expansion, and prosperity and good fortune here because you have a conjunction of the two wealth planets. But they're in a square to Saturn. And so there's always a sense of limitation and obstacles and difficulties. And that's essentially what we've seen with Ethereum. It has this great promise to revolutionize, smart contract technology, to revolutionize finance and all human financial transactions through smart contracts. But it's always up against these scaling problems and practical use problems. I mean, we just saw recently, like the gas prices went through the roof. So yeah, so it has a lot of problems. It has great potential, but it has a lot of problems, and it always will, unfortunately, with this natal Saturn square. So that tells us something. It's different than Bitcoin. I don't like it as much as Bitcoin because of that factor. It also has this kind of Uranus Mars square, which I think makes it very hard to predict. It also has a Uranus Moon square. So it has a Mars Moon's opposition with a Uranus apex T square. We call this a T square. Okay. That just makes this chart very hard to predict. So it's not as good for like actionable trading. But it does give us some information. So this is really interesting. I want to throw up this transit here. This is the transits, okay? And let's go back a couple of weeks. This was really interesting because the Ethereum Sun, so the Ethereum Sun actually has dignity in Leo, which is nice. I mean, that's great when you have the Sun in Leo. We really like that, right? I mean, that's interesting because Ethereum thinks it's like the king. We know that it's not, right? Bitcoin is actually the king, but Ethereum maybe thinks it's the king. It has a lot of confidence, and it has a lot of pride, and it has a lot of dignity, and that gives it a lot of strength and power actually there. So it's not that Ethereum is bad, but that's actually a good placement for Ethereum there. Now, but it was at ground zero of the Uranus Saturn square in February. You can see here if I go back, look at the transits here. You had Saturn was opposing the Bitcoin Sun as Uranus was squaring it. Okay, so that gave us some information about Ethereum that was a little different than Bitcoin. And sure enough, we saw, initially on the square of Uranus, which was very dramatic, right, and unpredictable and surprising, we actually saw that new all-time high initially of Ethereum over $2,000. But then, Saturn came in and made that opposition to the Bitcoin Sun. And that was really interesting because it actually kind of lined up with Pluto. Let me just go to the day here. It lined up with that Pluto. It lined up with Pluto conjunct the Bitcoin progress Sun at the same time that Saturn was opposing the Ethereum natal Sun. So I did put that in the February forecast report. And Saturn was opposing the Ethereum Sun until about February 24th. So now let's go back here for a second. I'm going to look at the Ethereum price chart. And I put some lines on the chart here for Ethereum. And you can see from here, February 9th, this blue line here to this outer blue line here. That was the time that Uranus square was in effect. Then I put the inner lines here. This was the time that Saturn, was in effect. Was a shorter period of time that overlapped. So the Ethereum Sun was caught in between Uranus and Saturn. Uranus initially pumped it to a new all-time high on this daily wick to $2,000. But then, I was looking at this and going, wow, we got a new all-time high as Saturn was actually opposing the Ethereum Sun. And I was kind of thinking that was really unexpected. But then, at the very end, it did, right when it correlated to the Bitcoin chart with Pluto conjunct the Bitcoin progress Sun on the February 21st, that's when we got the big drop. So there was an overlapping correspondence there, and that Saturn opposition to the natal Ethereum sun did produce a dramatic drop in the price from a high of 2033 all the way down to 1,291. So it was actually it was a much more dramatic drop than Bitcoin's drop. Bitcoin was a $15,000 drop, but it wasn't that much percentage-wise. The Ethereum drop was like 40%. You know, it was a much more steeper drop actually, and it broke through some of its moving averages. You know, that I think Bitcoin, you know, it broke through the 50-day moving average, and it actually broke through the previous all-time high as resistance. So that was the action of Saturn opposing the Ethereum sun was, you know, quite dramatic. Actually, it really scaled things back. But then, you know, Saturn kind of moved off of there, and then Uranus was still squaring, and it surprisingly, you know, came back very strongly, very quickly after that there. So those are just some real life examples of how we're using, you know, look at what we're looking at, how we're using that actionable information for more for long-term, you know, for our long-term things. Now, if we go back to the Ethereum chart, you know, we look at the transits here. It's kind of interesting because I want to draw your attention to this, and then I'll take a few questions at the end. You know, I'll stay a little bit later and take more questions, but just want to point your attention to two other things here, which is in the Ethereum natal chart. What I really look for correspondence in the natal between the Bitcoin natal. Ethereum has a natal Pluto at 13 degrees Capricorn. That's right on top of the Bitcoin sun. It means they both get transited at the same time. And it thus means that Uranus will make, as it makes that trine to the Bitcoin natal sun that we talked about for a 10-month period from you know, May through April of May 2021 through April 2022, it will also trine the Ethereum Pluto. Ethereum Venus at 0 Pisces is exactly opposite the Bitcoin Venus at 0 Pisces, also meaning they get transited at the same time. When Jupiter conjuncts the Bitcoin natal Venus that we talked about as a very exciting transit, it will also oppose the Ethereum natal Venus. And that's not bad. I don't think that oppositions are always bad. Oppositions between the two benefics can be actually excessive. So we could see a really kind of an overvaluation of Ethereum during that period of time, that maybe they're more precarious. It may not last. The kind of what we see, Ethereum tends to be even more volatile than Bitcoin, more unpredictable than Bitcoin. So anyway, those are just some correspondences. One thing I want to look at really, really quick here is the link chart. I said I would look at this. I want to keep my promise. I'm going to look at the link natal chart here. And, you know, as I said, one thing I really like is Venus North Node at 24 Leo, and you've got Venus here at 26 Leo. I really love whenever you see a Venus or Jupiter on the North Node, it's very, very favorable in financial astrology. Now, we also have a beautiful, let me see here. We have a nice grand trine in fire between Venus at 26 Leo, Saturn at 21 Sagittarius, and Uranus at 27 Leo. Okay, so this is very good. You know, this is pretty much the best chart, you know, I've seen, you know, since Bitcoin chart, basically. I really like this chart. A grand trine in fire with Venus, Uranus, and Saturn. That's an amazing, you know, aspect. Venus is conjunct the North Node. Now, this means that Venus is trine Uranus in this natal chart. And that means that, you know, it's going to make sudden, dramatic, unexpected moves, right? So it's been kind of sitting, you know, it's in a sideways consolidation pattern right now after an all-time high of $35. I really think the next move could be explosive. The last move was from about $11 to $35 on Link. And I think the next move could be up to $50 or $60. So we're just holding that long-term and into that May through July period as well. And, you know, anything that comes into the end of fire is going to be very good here for Link. anything that activates that grand trine and fires is going to be really good for links. So that's really good. Now let's go and talk about some questions here. I mean, I hope that information was what you guys were hoping for today. I mean, obviously, it's not really good for the short-term trading setups. That takes a lot more time to really study and understand. And it was, just wanted to give you the basic foundation of how we approach things. So yeah, I hope that's this was what you guys were looking for. And, I'm happy to clarify any questions here for 10 or 15 minutes and talk to you guys yeah, try to clarify any points, or if there's anything that I didn't talk about you wanted me to talk about. Now would be a great time, to bring that up. Okay, Lori has a question here. Is the Ethereum Pluto conjunct the Bitcoin Sun related to the conversation about the flippening? I.e., yeah, Ethereum surpassing Bitcoin in market. Is Ethereum in competition with Bitcoin? Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't know. I mean, that they obviously kind of have a somewhat of a tough relationship there. If you're doing like a relationship astrology synastry for them, one person's Pluto on the other person's Sun. They could empower each other, though. They could empower each other, and that's really how I see that aspect playing out. There is definitely a competitive. I just don't see the Ethereum chart as being as strong as the Bitcoin chart. So I don't think the flippening is going to happen, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Mary Hegel asks, can you talk about the orb of influence you typically use? Yeah, so that's a tricky question, right? Like, when does the aspect actually come into effect? On those major outer planet aspects, we really see the orb is going to be under 1 degree, and especially what we call partile. We talk about partile a lot. That's in the same degree, when the aspect is in the same degree number. Okay, like we talked about today, Neptune hits the 21st degree of Pisces. And so I think, so that's going to be partile in the opposition, to the Bitcoin natal Saturn. However, Venus is also in a partile aspect today. It's in a partile at 29 degrees Pisces. It's sextile the Bitcoin natal Jupiter. So, that's a good aspect that might offset, at least for today. Venus, whenever Venus and Jupiter come together in any aspect configuration, it's always typically a positive. So we really look at, we really look at, 1 to 0 degrees as being the aspect that we're most concerned about. However, like in the case of Uranus is within about 3 or 4 or 5 degrees of a trine to both, Bitcoin, Mars, and Sun, for years, actually, right? Like Uranus started trining the Bitcoin Mars in 2019, and it's still technically trying the Bitcoin Mars, although it's separating now about 3 degrees out. So there is an effect. There's a long-term effect. The way these are playing out, they're playing out over long periods of time. There's a background effect. Uranus trine to the Bitcoin Sun is in effect for 10 months. It never gets more than 3 degrees away, right? So it's always going to be in effect, but the really strong market action is going to be, 2, 1, and 0 degrees of the orb, okay? Now for the daily transit pictures, we're really looking at those partile aspects, right? I'm really looking at, today Venus is at exact sextile 29, Pisces to 29, Jupiter, natal Jupiter at 29 Capricorn. That's what, if I'm doing day trading, margin trading, I'm looking to hit those exact aspects. But like, for example, Jupiter, Jupiter's going to be conjunct the Bitcoin natal Neptune for about 4 or 5 days in the same degree. So sometimes it hits right before the exact in the price action. Sometimes it actually the exact triggers a price action that takes a few hours or a few days to play out, or a few weeks even. So the orbs are tricky. I mean, yeah, when, you know, for example, Neptune opposing the Bitcoin natal Saturn, like I said, it goes partile today. Okay, it hits 29 degrees Pisces. But it doesn't hit exact until April 10th. That's 3 weeks from now, right? So it's partile approaching exact for 3 weeks. So when does it hit? Does it start hitting now, or does it hit more closer to April 10th? Well, we flagged April 5th through April 10th as a period, you know, high risk potential for a big correction. I know one of those $10,000, $15,000 rug pulls. There's some other transits we're looking at that we don't like. Mars is going to be squaring Bitcoin, Uranus, and Saturn axis. Venus debilitated in Aries is going to square Pluto, right? So that's all around April 9th, 10th, 11th. So we're looking at multiple factors there. Now, does that mean we're definitely going to get a pullback? No, we can't say that. We can only say there's a higher probability. So start putting some cash, you know, aside now. You know, even if it's a few $100s, a few $1,000s, whatever you have, just start putting that aside now for a bigger pullback. April, you know, larger picture, you know, April 1st through the 15th. Okay, smaller, more granular, detailed, April 5th through the 12th is that really 7-day period. That really, that's the period we're really looking at to have a buying opportunity. Because then, of course, we think, right, it's going to really take off again in May, especially. So if there is another buying opportunity here in April, that would be, right, that might be a last chance entry here before a really big rally with Jupiter in Pisces and Uranus trying the Bitcoin sun. And that's our current theory. You know, that's our current theory, especially now if we see a huge euphoric rally on Jupiter conjunct the Bitcoin Neptune. You know, so I talked about this in the March live stream on Patreon. If we see a big rally in the end of March on Jupiter conjunct the Bitcoin natal Neptune, let me just go on the screen share for a second here and get that. You know, now I'm going into like a kind of a forecast thing, but you know, this is a real life, you know, applications, right? This is the link chart. We want to go to the Bitcoin chart, and we want to put those transits up here, right? So let's go granular here for a second, right? So Jupiter is going to come up here to 22 degrees, and it's going to make exact, you know, right around the 27th, 28th. So if you get a big spike there, you know, you might want to sell a little bit, okay? You know, not the lowest risk is not selling at all right now and just adding on a pullback. But maybe you want to take a 5% profit and put that on the side just in case you get a pullback here on April, you know, around April 10th when Neptune is going to hit that exact aspect, okay? Neptune's going to hit the exact opposition to the Bitcoin natal Saturn here. Maybe it's the day before. Okay, April 9th. It's actually around April 9th. And then also, as I said, you've got Venus is starting to make that square, you know, to Pluto. So you could have a pullback there. You could maybe you could buy back lower. However, you know, it could backfire. Maybe there's no pullback and you have to buy back higher. So there's always going to be that risk, okay? Financial astrology is just going to give you a trading setup, but, you know, there's always a risk versus reward, okay? So I'm not saying you should definitely sell if there's a rally at the end of March. You know, it's up to you and what kind of trader you are, how skilled, how good is your technical analysis, and what transits are maybe going on in your own natal chart and so forth like that. Anyway, just looking at practical applications of this stuff. Any other questions, guys, before we wrap this up, or we're going a little bit over time here? I know it's a really complex subject. There's a lot to study and learn, and I hope you guys will go back over this video, you know, and really study it in slow motion, right? Slow it down and pause it. Really look over the PDFs and learn the planets, learn the signs. And maybe buy my Intro to Basic Astrology package that goes over all the houses and aspects. And I have 3 tutorial videos. And check out our next workshop in April on basic natal chart interpretation, for human beings and also for assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Well, we'll go much more in depth into natal chart analysis. Not going to really go over, what the planetary aspects. The planetary symbolism. I'm going to assume you guys already know how to read the glyphs, know the basic symbolism of the planets. That's going to be a more intermediate level workshop. Can you share again the birth time that you're using for Bitcoin? Yeah, the Genesis block is time stamped for 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time for January 3rd, 2009. So that's the chart that we use. That should give you a 4-degree Aries moon, no matter what location you use. So that's important to understand that. Yeah, that's, and then, I really encourage you guys to, print up that Bitcoin natal chart and, put it on your wall and go and get a subscription to Luna software or SolarFire or one of the other ones and start tracking those transits, right? And when you read my reports and updates now, you can see what we're talking about. Okay, why is he bullish on this aspect? Why is he worried about this aspect? Why is he making this formulation? You can understand my thinking a little bit better, hopefully now, which isn't, I'm not always going to be right, but at least you understand my thought process, right? Literally drew Bitcoin natal chart on my wall a few days ago. Yeah, maybe get it tattooed on your arm, right? Or draw it on a whiteboard or a chalkboard where you can move the transits and the progressions, and then have the Ethereum chart next to it so you can look for those cross correlations. That's what we're doing right now. We're really trying to look for those cross correlations. And if you read my March subscription report, we did a whole section on Ethereum and Vitalik Buterin and looked for cross correlations between his chart and Ethereum chart and the Ethereum chart and the Bitcoin chart. And you can start getting really complicated into some complex mathematical, geometrics. But you have to have a basic foundation, to be able to do that. And that's what I'm trying to get people, into that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing a lot of questions. I'm coming through here. I'm going to last call for questions. If anybody has any questions over anything that I've gone over, planetary themes, sign archetypes, Bitcoin or Ethereum natal chart, trading setups. This is your last chance here on this live workshop to get some questions. Of course, you can always email me at astrocryptoreport@gmail.com. If you, want follow-up questions, I do private tutorials. They're $150 an hour. I usually do an hour and a half for people. We have a $150 Patreon level. That gets you a private session every month with me to go over questions. And we can talk about anything you want, during those sessions. And if we can answer and go over clarification of this stuff. And I also, of course, do, natal chart financial readings for people looking for periods. We can identify periods of good fortune and good luck where you can add risk in your trading, or potentially periods where you want to reduce risk. And also just bring more insights and personality analysis for natal chart consultations. All right, guys, we've gone about a little over 3 hours here, and I think that was about what I wanted to cover. Those were the things I wanted to look at, and so I hope this gives you a solid platform moving forward here. And following me on Twitter, I'm doing literally sometimes 2 or 3 updates a day on the Bitcoin astrology price action. Of course, on Patreon, we're doing 2 to 3 updates a week. On anywhere from Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, total crypto market cap, Bitcoin dominance versus alts, long-term versus short-term analysis, right? So if you guys are not following me on Twitter and Patreon already, I hope you will. And now you can understand what I'm talking about, the jargon, the technical talk, the shop talk of astrology. Hopefully, you'll be able to understand that a lot better. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. I'm going to be emailing you the links to the videos. I'm going to be emailing everybody the PDFs for the classes, the PDFs that I used. Adriano has one last question. How do you keep track of your crypto investments? Are you using some crypto portfolio trackers out there? I mean, it's on the exchanges. I mean, if you have a hard wallet, sometimes you have crypto spread out in different exchanges or on different private hard wallets. I mean, so you've got to just figure out a way, okay, I've got 0.2 Bitcoin here and 0.3 Ethereum here, whatever. Blockfolio app is actually, I think, the best one for that. That's a great app to use. You can program in all your crypto holdings onto that one app. So Blockfolio, the Blockfolio app can help you keep track of all of your different various crypto holdings. I mean, you could do an Excel spreadsheet, I guess, too. Yeah, it's complicated, especially because the prices are changing and fluctuating every day. So, all right, guys. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining again. I really appreciate everybody who joined today. We're going to get that information out to you, the PDFs and the video links over the next, today and tomorrow as I have time to do that. And maybe Lori will help me out with that. She was my TA for today, but I didn't have too many tasks for her. So, yeah, thanks for your great questions. Thanks for showing up. I know this was a really long workshop to sit here in front of Zoom for 3 hours, but I hope it was worthwhile. And I look forward to seeing you at more classes and workshops in the future. And we're going to learn and grow, more with astrology and financial astrology tools. That this is going to help give us a little edge over the markets. All we're trying to look for is that little edge over the long term that gives us an edge in our trading and investing, and hopefully will help us to determine, when to sell some of our Bitcoin, that we're not leaving too much money on the table. Of course, it's impossible to nail, market tops in an aspect that moves so wildly every day, but we want to have a general guideline for when we can cash out and take some profits, and when maybe this bull market cycle is coming to a peak. And we think one of the places we're looking is that January through April 2022. We don't really get worried until Pluto comes into a conjunction to the Bitcoin natal Jupiter in 2023. So that's something I just want to leave you with, and we'll be talking about that a lot more going forward in our reports and our analysis. So thanks again, everybody. It was great working with you, and good luck out there. May the force be with you. Trade safe using good risk management, and don't bite off more than you can chew. And hopefully we're all gonna, we're all getting rich here in slow motion with cryptocurrencies. I think this bull market has a lot left to go here, and we'll know a lot more where we're at in the May through July period for Bitcoin and Ethereum and some of these altcoins. Yeah, keep in touch and let me know how you like the class. And we'll see you next time, everybody. We'll see you next time.